All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, good evening. This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver. So the pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to the regular meeting of council for Monday, January 23rd at 7 o'clock. At this time, I ask Councillor Pope to do our land acknowledgement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pope. All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions in the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Murray, second by Councillor Forbes. I'll call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Council, we have 3 sets of minutes that have been circulated with the agenda. Are there any errors or omissions from those minutes as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption? Moved by Councillor Back. Is there a seconder on the motion? Second by Councillor Murray. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Just going to double check, Mr. Joyce, having some technical difficulties over there. Yes. And I probably should say that, just turn your volume down, Gavin. I probably should say that this meeting is being held in a hybrid format. That means members of the council, the staff, and the public can participate in this evening's meeting through virtual or in-person means. And so we will have some people, I'm sure, throughout the course of the evening who will be joining us on the video cameras to participate remotely. At this point, council, I'm going to start making my way through the agenda. At the front end of every meeting of council, we reserve a period of up to 30 minutes for input from the public on matters of import to them. We do start a speakers list through the clerk's department, and I do have a few speakers. I have 4 speakers signed up to speak to the front end of the meeting. As soon as those speakers are done, I'll check back in with the public to see if anyone else would like to add their comments. But at this point, we do have, 5 speakers signed up to speak. The first speaker that's going to be joining us is Esta Murenbiel. And joining us here in person. Welcome. And you have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm here to speak to Bylaw 8609. Your debate today. If I understand correctly, and I only heard of this last night late, you're trying to codify the fees and rules around permitting facilities and also raise funds. The North Shore Pickleball Club has benefited from permits to pickleball courts, and I'd like to let you know today a little more about who we are, why we can't afford these fees this year, and why this makes sense for you to continue to support a club of volunteers who help provide equitable, fair access to a scarce resource. Who we are, members of the North Shore Pickleball Club, are a unique community, 70% seniors and a majority female. As Our Lady Diana, who was here last year, reminded you, we seniors are all longtime district taxpayers and contributors to our community. Last year, our volunteers taught pickleball to over 400 youth in local North Shore schools, over 100 teachers and another 100 community members for free. Even at 65, I'm one of the young ones, and I've been paying taxes for 40 years in the district, and I'm going to Girl Guide Camp in April. So we're all long-time community contributors. Why we can't afford it is because North Shore Pickleball Club has been collecting the 2023 annual fee of $12.50 per adult since October. Seniors 80 plus and youth are free. That covers the cost of 2 balls and a couple of muffins for each person. And we already have almost 300 members signed up for the 2023 year. I need $8,000 I've estimated to pay for permits from July to Thanksgiving alone. And our board specifically reduced our membership fee last year so that we wouldn't run a surplus. And some of our surplus is promised to a tournament we're holding in March at Parkgate. Next November, I estimated that I would need to raise $18,000 to pay for permits in 2024, similar to what we enjoy now. And the North Shore Pickleball Club could decide not to apply for permits and play as a community instead, and that's what we've done in the past. But it's only with the permits that we were able to apply the rules for COVID. We had to withdraw our leadership in West Vancouver and the city without permits. And our volunteer coordination benefits new players, single people, and youth the most. 44% of our members in each of the last 2 years were new to the club. And this inclusive group of people will foot the bill to play with the club. This morning, I signed up to play indoor pickleball. In 2 minutes, 344 spots in 4 community centers on 16 courts were filled. So everybody now is waiting to play outdoors, but outdoor pickleball is also scarce. By December, I had 700 members wishing to play on 6 permitted courts, all in the district. Our goal this year is to attempt to convince the city and West Van to follow your lead and provide permits, or we may be forced to limit participation, just like in the indoor courts. So in summary, the North Shore Pickleball Club volunteers facilitate fair access to a scarce resource. Our existing club fees are not set up to pay for permits this year, and we are a seniors community that has already contributed to the facilities, but given time and consultation, we are prepared to look at contributing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next speaker that I have is Kathy Peters joining us virtually, followed by Caleb Rogers. So you make sure Kathy Peters can be. Kathy Peters, can you help me? Or can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Great. Thank you very much, Your Worship. I realize there will be a public forum on this issue of the cannabis retail store in Lynn Valley, but I was not sure I would be available at that time. Here's my ask. Please do not allow a business license for the retail cannabis store in Lynn Valley because it is not in the best interest of this community. 4 points. Number 1, what is the brand the District of North Vancouver wants to promote? After living on Bowen Island for 35 years, we moved to Lynn Valley for the access to wilderness, trails, mountains, and a charming, family-friendly community. The brand that you promote and endorse is important. Supporting a cannabis retail store is counter to that. Number 2, the location is on Library Lane, where we live and where children walk to and from school. Number 3, because something is legal does not mean it is supportive of community values or is a good thing. There are numerous cannabis shops not far away. Lynn Valley does not have to have one. And number 4, the majority of letters were against it. So why would you support it? I'm a BC anti-human trafficking educator, speaker, advocate. As many of you know, raising awareness about the impact of sexual exploitation in our communities, province, and the country. And I've been awarded a Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal for my advocacy work. Please note, drugs and alcohol are often involved in teen sexual abuse and assault. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Kathy Peters. Just to clarify, have we set a date for that public hearing at this point, Madam Clerk?
Yes, through your worship, the public hearing is scheduled to be held on February 7th.
February 7th. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, the next speaker I have is Caleb Rogers, followed by Ben Patton, and they're joining us here in person. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for having me. My name is Caleb Rogers, and I'm the Vice President, and I'm the co-founder of TreeCycle Canada. So at TreeCycle, we recycle wood waste into building products for the built environment, and we also recycle wood waste for generating bioenergy. Our expertise is the reuse of wood waste products while we still advocate for all recycled building materials as a whole movement. We need to find ways of providing incentive to homeowners and builders to utilize recycled building materials for their projects. This will help us reach zero waste goals sooner, reduce emissions from traditional waste streams, extend the life of our landfills, and provide economic benefits to our local circular economies. So a few ways we can do this. We can hold district-led public awareness campaigns about how to upscale these materials through local businesses, How about providing tax-based or fee reduction incentives for using these building materials in projects? How about creating zero waste demonstration sites with partnering local businesses, like the city's currently doing Vancouver's zero waste demo site, currently in the developing stage? By giving these types of opportunities to our community, we can increase the desire to do the right thing as right as the ability to do the right thing, and to further help guide us to a more universal circular economy. The district can continue to be a leader of sustainability within a net zero carbon and a zero waste future. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Caleb Rogers. Next speaker is Ben Patton, also joining us here in person.
Thank you very much. My name is Ben Patton, and I am the founding president of TreeCycle Canada. You've already heard Caleb speak about TreeCycle and the benefits of using recycled building materials. So let me tell you how TreeCycle hopes to reduce wood waste from the urban forest by recycling it as building materials. Now, when we say urban forest, we are actually talking about street trees and backyard trees, not forested parks, which these street trees and backyard trees are regularly removed for a number of reasons. And when they are removed, they are cut to a firewood almost every single time. Even though these are totally healthy, monster-sized trees, sometimes 4 feet in diameter, they were coming down for many different times. For instance, at the Baden Park development on Mount Seymour Parkway, this has dozens of trees scheduled for approval or approved for removal. In December, TreeCycle Canada was given a request by construction affiliate at Anthem to survey the trees at Baden Park. We estimate over 30,000 board feet being removed across the entire property in terms of the amount of trees. That is more than an entire house worth of usable wood. Now, we've saved many trees from the executioner's axe before, but alas, the hangman won't be cheated this time at Baden Park. As an arborist, I know that this is the status quo for arborists and developers, and we know that there is a soon to be a review of the tree protection bylaws. We ask council to investigate how to amend the tree protection bylaw to reflect the responsible recycling of wood fiber during necessary tree removals, in addition to further tree protections. We need to keep our green canopy for many different reasons and for many different benefits. More protections will ensure their benefits for decades to come. But when trees do in fact need to be removed, we can't waste it and fail to store it within the built environment, like Caleb said. Doing so will only help reach our net zero carbon and zero waste goals faster. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben Patton, for your comments. The next speaker I have is Harv Sidhu from Build Smart. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Harv, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Build Smarter. First off, I would like to applaud everyone here for the district for implementing the new demolition waste bylaw that salvages wood. This is a big step in the right direction, but there's still a long ways to go. As many of us are aware, 1/3 of all construction waste, 1/3 of all landfill waste, comes from construction waste. And this bylaw will have an impact on reducing that waste. Now, I want to take that same recycling circularity mindset and apply it to the front end for new construction. What if we also now built all of our homes from recycled materials? And it doesn't have to be a specific material. It can be any part of the house. Recycled wood, recycled steel, recycled bricks, recycled drywall, recycled flooring, recycled dirt. All of these items are readily available in the market right now. But why are they not being used? Why do we keep building using new materials when we have all these recycled materials options? The reason is pretty simple. It's economics. Right now, either it is just slightly cheaper or slightly easier for builders to use new materials. But this can be fixed. By implementing some type of a new materials tax, akin to a carbon tax or recycling tax, having a cost associated for using new materials will encourage all new construction to at least consider using recycled materials. Now, I deal with recycled steel. My friends here, Ben and Caleb, deal with recycled wood. And having a demolition bylaw, waste bylaw is great, but we think the next step is to have a circular construction bylaw that will motivate builders to use recycled materials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further speakers on the advanced list, but I do see a two virtual hands. So I'm going to call on Hazen Colbert and Lyle Craver to be moved over to the panel. see Lyle. I don't see Hazen yet. Okay, there's Hazen. Okay. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me? Sometimes takes a moment as people are being transferred over into the main meeting. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me?
Of course I can. Mike Little, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Mike Little and councillors. Earlier tonight, the mayor invited us to join the meeting, and he used a phrase, ladies and gentlemen. I think that that phrase is a bit outdated. It seems to be somewhat binary in its application. And I think another phrase should be used. And I say that only because I can assure all of you, I am not a lady, and I think all of you have already voted in December that I am certainly not a gentleman. So I would ask that perhaps we could use another phrase that is more inclusive and not so binary. I know that some people might object to this, but I am as you all know, I am woke, and I certainly support inclusiveness. And I think that that would be an appropriate way to invite people into the meeting. Since there was a person that spoke tonight, so that's the first thing I want to say. Since there is a person that spoke tonight about pickleball, it's my suggestion that perhaps we should organize a committee on racket sports, and perhaps even create an office and staff it with several people to review the concept of racket sports. And with respect to racket sports, I'm talking about pickleball, I'm talking about lacrosse, and I'm talking about tennis. And I think there should be a very large a book, perhaps 1,000 pages, a policy document that covers how the District of North Vancouver is going to manage racket sports going forward. In fact, I would actually recommend that there be an additional section in the OCP that includes racket sports, and that we reach out to the communities, the racquetball, tennis, pickleball, etc., and create policies, establish an office like we have a TDM office to manage racket sports. I think, in fact, that from what I'm hearing, racket sports is possibly a more important issue in the District of North Vancouver than affordable housing, transportation, etc. Just like in the last few years, the most important issues in this council were bike lanes, backyard chickens, pigeons, etc. So I do support putting resources into organizing an office for racket sports.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Hazen Colbert. The next speaker I have is Lyle Craver. Lyle Craver, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Your Worship.
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of quick notes on the community services grants that are coming forward tonight. I note that the Harvest Project has opted to go for a regular community services grant as opposed to their core funding on this one. While I understand the rationale for wanting to do what they're doing, I note that having served 4 years on the Community Services Advisory Committee and 3 years as vice chair, it does seem out of touch with the way the grants are done. Typically, what happens with the committee is that one or more members of the committee will present the application to the committee as a whole. They will vote and they will vote to grant either the entire amount or a portion thereof or not at all. And at the end of several weeks of deliberations, they find that they're always about 15 to 20% over budget. So they then do a reconciliation night where each of the successful applicants receives a portion of what had been originally approved for them. What that means is that the 2,000 and 2,000 and some odd dollars that Harvest would be getting through the standard CSAC process would necessarily be reduced typically by 15 to 25%. This is probably not what they want, but this is how the committee does their job. Therefore, I'm not really sure this is the appropriate method for them to seek the grant, and core funding is indeed the way they should go. With respect to the marijuana shop, thank you for mentioning the night of the public hearing. My reservations about the application are primarily in the area of notification, because frankly, when the applicant for a license is in fact a shopping mall, I do not think 100 meters notification is suitable, particularly when the public notification was not made on either of the arterial roads, Lynn Valley Road and Mountain Highway, that were close by the shopping mall. I don't understand it, but I have seen successive public hearings where items have come forward that simply have not received anything remotely resembling suitable public notification. Again, a shopping mall is a community matter, and 100 meters is totally inadequate for notification zone. As a result, I ask you to reconsider what the notification zone should be for applications of this sort. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to all the council.
Thank you for your comments, Lyle Craver. Would anybody else like to address the regular meeting of council? I see no virtual hands. I see no hands here in the audience, so I'm going to carry on with the meeting. Okay, at this point, we're going to be moving on to reports from council or staff. The first item that we have up for discussion is the outdoor sports facilities fees and charges, item 8.1. Are we going to have staff comment to open the matter? Mr. Daniluk.
Recommending the fees and charges bylaw to include outdoor sport facility fees and to treat them consistent with other recreation fees and charges. There's been some discussion about who's impacted by this change, and a message went out earlier today to clarify how the sport field groups are impacted. The primary impact on these groups relates to the artificial turf rates, which are proposed to increase as shown in table 1, and the effective date for the proposed increase is July 1st of this year. I understand there's other concerns with the report. Staff are happy to answer any questions. With regards to the pickleball discussion a little bit earlier, I just wanted to emphasize that there are no new fees being introduced. It's just changes to existing fees as they're applicable to booking tournaments and such. So there should be no other changes other than to the existing fees that are out there today. So just wanted to clarify that point. And as I mentioned, staff are available to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this point, I am prepared to move a recommendation, but I'm not prepared to remove all three readings. So I'll be moving first and second reading to allow us more opportunity to engage with some of the stakeholders in this area before we make the final decision, because I think we have heard in emails today that some of these changes are impactful to the organization. So first and second reading gives us an opportunity for further discussion on the matter, but it puts it on the floor properly. Is there someone willing to second that? I saw Councillor Hansen's hand. My own comments on the matter. I mean, obviously, as an organization, we've been hit by inflationary increases across the board. In many years past, we've had years where lumber's been high, or steel's been high, or labor's had a contract adjustment. Everything's hitting us all at once in the organization, and it's across all sectors. This is the inflation that all of our businesses are facing, as well as everybody buying services in the community. So unfortunately, we do also need to be able to recoup user fees wherever possible. There's an awful lot of people that do not get to take advantage of some of the sports fields, and while they do contribute some funds through their taxes, We do seek recuperation through user fees wherever we can in these sports. And when we look at the sports in our community, we really put them into three different buckets. The sports that are both fully contributing to their capital and operations, sports that are really only contributing to their operations, but not really covering the capital costs, and then sports that are being subsidized fully on both capital and operations costs. And so in the first category, the ones that are covering all of their costs and the capital, you've got your golf and soccer, or sorry, golf and skiing, and some of the private sports that are taking place. Indoor tennis is an example in that. And then in the second group, which is they're not contributing to capital necessarily or wholly, but they are contributing to their operations. These are a lot of your court sports and indoor sports. And then the ones that are neither fully, wholly contributing to capital and operations, this would be like your swimming pools, where everybody in the pool is subsidized by the public to some degree because it's a fairly expensive operation. We have to move as many of the sports into the first category as we possibly can, which is to make sure that sports are fully contributing to the capital and also having a state of good repair approach to the operations and maintenance of the facilities that we have in the community. And that means that we have to continue to increase the rates in line with inflation. And so I support the strategy presented by staff here today. I do think that it's reasonable to go back to the field users and see what impacts there are. From some of the correspondence we received today, it appears as though some of the user groups were quite surprised by the change. And so I think we need to take a bit of a pause and go back and talk about this impact, what we did clarify, what we gave advance warning on, and what we still need to do some dialogue in the community. I'm a little surprised, Mr. Danilek, so I'm glad you said the comments that there's no new fees on this, because one of the comments that was made to me was that gravel fields were previously not contributing and now they are. And so for some sports that largely use gravel fields, it would all of a sudden become quite a dramatic change for them. And so I'd like that clarified. And then also we obviously have new and developing sports in our community like pickleball, which we've made a significant public investment in the expansion of pickleball, both at Murdo Fraser and Kate's Park. And some other opportunities around for shared spaces. And it would be a shame to be supporting it on one side and then taking so much back from it on the other side that it wasn't able to grow. That being said, of course, I want all sports to be able to contribute fairly to the contribution needed to keep their sports running in good repair. But I'm supportive of this being read first and second time, and then I'd like the matter to come back to us after we explore some of the challenges that these rate increases are going to present to our stakeholders. Councillor Hanson, you're the seconder on the matter.
Thank you very much. And I agree with all of the comments that you put forth in moving the recommendation. What we have here is a proposal for an average 5% increase, a range of 4% on the low side, 6% on the high side. The pickleball fees, in fact, are at the 4% range. We are told this is consistent with increases across other local governments in the region, and obviously less than the rate of inflation, which has been running approximately 8%, even more for the types of goods and services that are purchased by local government. These increases are part of a broader circumstance that we're facing, which is that in this inflationary environment, our costs are going up, and we need to consider how to balance our budget and make sure that we do so in a way which is fair and balanced. I believe that in this situation, raising these types of fees 4 to 6% is reasonable, fair, and balanced. Taxpayers are going to be facing an increase, and it would not be appropriate, in my view, to focus increases on some of our taxes and levies and not elsewhere. It has to be fair from my point of view and balanced. So this, I believe, is such a proposal. I do support it only being read the first and second time to give us a little bit more opportunity to survey user groups and determine the impact. But on the face of it, I support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little, and I'll support the first and second reading. I think I think there's some confusion between the sport council and the field users and the memorandum of understanding for the field levies and these user fees. That's the first problem. The second one was the communication to the groups, and I know that sports users were contacted in December. There was a meeting, but I don't. There's confusion about what was the direction, when it was going to come forward, and when it was going to be implemented. There's in the report, it suggested that there would be enough time for the user groups to be able to manage their registration and the impact of these increases. And I think that all of those groups work differently. That's not all the same. They have spring break camps, they have summer camps, they have fall registration, etc. And I think that we needed to be able to talk to them about how this was going to impact that. We've heard from the pickleball users, and I'm sort of concerned at the $18,000 number. You know, I think we have to look at the level of impact to pickleball and what $18,000 means. That's a shocking number from a perspective of user fees and how exactly this is being calculated. I see Mr. Joyce. So I just think there's confusion in this. It's all well and good that you know, from a staff perspective, and maybe some members of certain groups that maybe understood it, but I don't think council understood from the perspective of the community. And I think there were a lot of groups and heads of groups that were representing thousands of players that had no idea what was going on with this report that's been placed on our agenda. I agree. They agree that they need to pay their fair share. But this is a process question, a communication question, and how these reports are laid out. We do need to look at that, Mayor Little and Mr. Stewart. You know, too often, like where in this report did it say that there was consultation, or where it was in this report that there was a reach out to our local user groups for comment in any of this? And that's what we need to add in. Mayor Little talked about the gravel fields, and I would say that you, Mr. Daniluk, stated that there's no increases, but there does seem to be a question in regards to lighting, that they didn't pay for that previously, but they're paying for that now, that now under these fees. The MOU with the field levy, again, is different. And so your comment to me earlier this afternoon when I spoke to you was that this was for all the other users. And I have to ask myself, who are all the other users if it's not the sports teams? Because all those fields are used by organized groups. Inter-River is fenced, and unless you have a permit, you can't use it because it's used for organized teams. So that's another piece that needs to be clarified and understood. We went through a very bumpy process with the carpet at Argyle, the process between the school district, the sport council, ourselves. We don't want to repeat that anymore. We have a lot of work, in my opinion, in regards to communication, a streamlined process, and making sure that everybody understands what's going on before we bring these types of reports to council. I will tell the new councillors and remind some of the more experienced councillors that when we implemented workshops, council workshops, it was for this very thing, to talk about an issue, to ask a whole bunch of questions, get a whole bunch of answers and more information back, to tear something apart, and then send it on to a council meeting for discussion. And I see a number of reports in this agenda this evening that I really think could use with a bit of a chin wag. And not just placed on an agenda for us to raise our hands or oppose, because I don't think that's serving anybody's interest. Sorry, Mehdi. I wasn't speaking into my mic, but I'm so loud, I'm sure you all heard me. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you for your comments, Councilor Muir. And I think it is a fair point that, you know, in the boilerplate of our reports, we don't have a section on consultation, but it is an expectation of the council that we will consult on these things. So it should be in the report.
But we're going to add it.
There you go. Well, I'll talk about that with Mr. Stewart. Mr. Daniel, any responses to the comments from Councilor Muir?
Yes, Your Worship. With regards to the lighting, there are no lighting fees charged on artificial turf fields. And when it comes to the gravel lit fields and the sports field users, those lit field charges are covered under the memorandum of understanding. So those charges are not applicable to the sports field users.
But again, the report was not clear.
I agreed.
So that's why there's all this confusion with everyone.
Just one other comment. This is the first time that these charges are being brought into the bylaw. And you're making the point that there's a lot of people impacted, and that's true. And so one of the intentions is to improve transparency around the fees and to improve their planning. And maybe that's having the opposite effect today, but that is the intention. And especially with the treasurers for the groups, they need to know what the fees are, to be clear about it, and how they're changing. And enshrining them in a bylaw will help with that.
No, and I agree, Mr. Danlick. I think that that's more transparent and that should be the end goal. We're going to have to, but that doesn't mean we still don't consult along the way. So, but I agree with you that, so in the past, REC would just, North Vancouver Recreation Commission would just tell the sports users groups what the changes were going to be for that given year. Now we're handling it at the council table for that transparency piece. And so I'm glad that we're doing that.
Mayor Little, could we just make sure that staff includes when you come back that you give a list or identify those non-sport groups that are using these fields? I think it's really important to identify who they are because there's.
It may be a tiny negligible portion of the overall fees though, if it's,
But I
a
think we should.
non-MOU sport that's using lighting on our fields, that may be,
But I think we do know who they are. So I think there should be some indication as a way to identify those groups that are going to be paying these fees apart from the MOU with the sports groups.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Pope, followed by Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Jordan. I agree with many of the points that have been made. However, I'm opposed to this motion. I feel that more consultation is needed with community groups, stakeholder groups. I think that they weren't surprised by this. They were blindsided. That's how they feel. They're pretty upset, many of the ones that have reached out to me, and I don't think that's fair. There is a lot of confusion and it needs to be clarified and outlined in detail. Additionally, I feel that we are heading into a recession. Outdoor sports is one of the few affordable sports for families, seniors, lots of other people who are already struggling to cope with inflation and high grocery bills. This, to me, is the wrong time to increase fees, even if it's only 5%. I would like to see us defer this or table it for probably a year to allow for engagement with stakeholders so we can fully understand the full implications of it, and so can they, and come to a place of acceptance, presumably. And I think that I'm not quite sure what the wording would be to defer it for 1 year or to delay it or send it back to staff for reworking. But one of those things has to be done, I think. Thank you. Those are my comments.
So what I can do, so it would obviously materially change the what's on the table, what's been moved and seconded on the table. There is, I guess, it would be an order to consider a deferral at your request. If there is somebody who's willing to second it, then council would have a debate on the issue of deferral. But the other way to do it is the matter is already being paused. It would be given first and second. We can have the discussion, get the additional information, and then have the vote at third. And if the vote is defeated, then an alternate motion could come in. So it could take place in a series of ways. I think I would be inclined at this point to go back and get further information before we make a decision like that, recognizing that if we don't if we don't keep pace with inflation in this area, that means we have to subsidize it with higher taxes, because that's the other source of income on it. And so we can pursue any one of those avenues. Those would all be in order. So I guess then the question comes to you, do you want to put that on the floor as a deferral motion seeking a seconder for the matter? Or are you satisfied that we're going to already have a pause in the system before we come back for third?
Could we just add one thing, Kat? Oh, sorry.
That would be out of order. Sorry, Susan Clerk.
Thank you, through your worship. I would probably recommend referral back to staff would be in order rather than deferral. If you defer it, then it stays in its current format and cannot be amended unless amended through the bylaw reading process. Rather than if you refer it back to staff, they can do the work and come back with the revised bylaw.
I always get confused about referral and deferral. Okay. So
That
and
sounds
the matter
reasonable
would
to
be
me.
referred back to staff. Now, but that does leave us in the situation where we would end up covering the loss through taxation, but that's your motion that you want to put on the floor is referral back to staff? That's in order to refer refer this motion back to staff for consideration.
Yes, and I would like to just add to
I
that.
need to grab a seconder on the motion
Oh, I'm
before we have
sorry.
any further discussion on it. Is there a seconder on the matter?
to vote on the current motion.
No, this actually preempts the current motion, and if the council decides that they don't want to continue speaking about the matter and they refer the matter to another forum, then it stops debate on the original motion. So is there a seconder for Councillor Pope's motion to refer this matter back to staff?
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Councillor Back. Now discussion on referral. Councillor Back, on your seconding the motion, do you have any further comments on referral?
So my comments would be largely along the lines of the comments that have been made so far. I feel as though the user community have really been caught offside, and I would like to be able to go back to them and have a conversation. By giving it first and second reading tonight, it does move this along, and I understand that, you know, the increases have to happen, but I don't like the fact that so many people were caught off guard with this change. So I think by referring it back to staff, it does allow them an opportunity to have conversations with those various user groups, and then we can come back and debate it. And that I don't think has to take a long time to be able to come back.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, do you have a comment on referral? Okay, Councillor Murray, did you have a comment on referral?
Yes, I think that, I think if we're going to refer it back to staff, then we need to understand the impact for the calendar year to the user groups, and certainly the comments that were made by the pickleball users, what kind of impact, financial impact it's going to be for them, and their ability to be able to absorb that impact. I think and that's what I was going to ask when I was trying to interrupt and you wouldn't let me. We don't, once we understand that information, once we have that information, because that's going to come out of the discussion with the user groups and certainly pickleball, then when it came back at third reading, we'd have to defeat the whole thing and start all over again if that was something that was, you know, significant. And we have to give them time to be able to understand how to absorb those costs, right? Because right now those numbers, and I know Mr. Joyce may be able to calculate pickleball user numbers different than the pickleball players, but it sounds like a very significant number. And how are they going to be able to accommodate that number, you know, going into the next year? So I think we need to look at that.
That's fine. I will just say you can amend under either circumstance.
I understand, but I think this needs to have a full,
Okay.
this is unusual for us doing it this way anyway. So-
Well, it's the first time we're considering this
Yeah.
specific fees issue, but
So take note on how not to add a new thing next time, because we're going to go through
how to
this.
slowly add something next time. Councillor Ma, your comments on referral, please. Thank you. I'm gonna go, your mic, please.
Sorry. This is a question in terms of referring it. Is there a time frame when it could come back? And then, you know, to Lisa's, or sorry, Councilor Murray's point about the impact on the different clubs scheduling the increases.
We'd have to have discussion with the senior group and staff to figure out when we could return it to council, but I can't imagine it would take us that long to compile what's been requested so far.
Yeah. And like most people here, you know, groups need to pay their way. And when I talked to a few of the groups today, they weren't resisting paying, it's just the timing and the notice. And I like your analogy, Mayor Little, about the buckets, but is there a way when we refer this to staff to get clarification on, you know, why certain activities are in a certain bucket, like swimming. I get it, it's expensive, maintenance, but they're in a bucket that is not recovered. When I look at track fields, there's high usage. It's not just the user groups, there's people walking, running to stay in shape. What is the criteria to be in that third bucket? That's probably one question I would like to ask when it's referred back to the staff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think there's same kinds of arguments as were raised by Pickleball today about how specifically that there's so many seniors that participate. They're a group that's hard to recover fees from entirely. Swimming on the flip side is overwhelmingly people under 18 that are participating in our swimming programs at our facilities. And so over the years, there have been different philosophies to approach the rates. But if swimming was fully paying for its operations and its capital, there would only be the North Shore Winter Club on the North Shore. The public facilities require significant public investment in order for that capacity to exist in our community. Yes, to the whole public. Absolutely. I said investment. I said investment. I did. And not just subsidy, investment. There you go. I see Mr. Joyce is adding his comments with his microphone on.
Your worship, when staff does report back, I'm just going through the report, we'd have to consult with the city of North Vancouver as well in regards to the bylaw, because it's done jointly with the city. I don't know where they are with their process, but the fees are set jointly and then administered by North Van Rec Commission.
Mr. Daniluk, do you know the timing for the city?
In discussion with the city earlier this week, they were thinking later in Q1. They're having to bring forward all of their charges to make their bylaw similar to ours. So it's going to take them until the end of Q1.
So theoretically, the deadline, the point at which we can no longer use user fees to cover this gap is going to be immediately in advance of our final budget deliberation in April.
Yes.
Okay. And before tax distribution in May. Okay. So we have some time. Either option provides us time. On the floor right now is referral back to staff, which would put it back in our hands to look at the matter and try to return it onto the council agenda in a timely fashion. I think you're pretty much in exactly the same situation if we give it first and second reading and then we put it back on the agenda when it was appropriate for third reading. So we could go either way on this, and I think it will materially, as far as staff is concerned, not be different. Any other comments on referral? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question on referral back to staff. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. Item is referred with Councillor Hanson opposed. Okay, there you go. Next item up for discussion tonight is the outdoor customer service area regulation changes and process improvement. This is item 8.2. And so I'll now go to, I guess, are we starting with engineering on this one or planning? Mr. Milburn. Microphone, sir.
Can you hear me? Hi, it's so nice to see you all in person. And I will just do a brief intro. I'm wearing my mask because I have this lingering cough that won't go away. So. Okay, yeah. So just a quick intro for the outdoor customer service area for this item. We're pretty pleased tonight to introduce this, the patio program, the OCSA, the patio program.
I'm going to ask you to speak up nice and loud for people at home so they can hear you through the system as well, please.
Yes. So the intent of the OCSA, aka the patio program, is really just to transition those pandemic-related patios, the temporary ones, to their permanent state, respecting the regulation of the district and respecting the safety and building code. So staff from multiple departments have come together. We have worked with businesses. We have also listened to the public. And basically tonight is the culmination of many months of staff's work. As you will see in our package, we're recommending a streamlined regulatory framework as well as a streamlined process as well to facilitate patio moving forward. And all this is with the goal, I will say, with the goal that's stated on the page 3 of the report of contributing to council priority in terms of economic development, as well as building the vibrancy in our town centers and village centers. So we do have a quick presentation from staff lead, Kevin Zhang and Holly Adams. It's really quick overview. And then after that, we'd be happy to answer any questions and hearing the discussions.
Welcome. I've been tipped off that it's about a 10-minute presentation. Is that about right? Okay, I see affirmation from Kevin there. Okay, great. Welcome and looking forward to your presentation.
It should be on the desktop. That computer doesn't join the meeting anymore. I can share with everyone as long as you're sharing your presentation.
There you go.
Oh, one sec. Yeah, sure. Can we begin the presentation now?
Yes, are you sharing? I think I can press, if you start the presentation mode. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Good evening. Oh, you got to be really close. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and members of the public. My name is Kevin Zhang, Senior Development Plan.
Dragon.
All right. Thanks. Oh, I think it's still very echoey. That's right.
Nice and loud. You pay for the whole seat, but you only need the edge or something like that.
I would just ask anyone that's in the Zoom meeting in the room if you could just make sure your computer is muted and microphone is off.
So everyone needs to make sure your devices are muted. All right, I'm going to mute mine as well. And I also see Dan Milburn, you have yours.
Hello. Test. Is it yours? Are you on me? No. Hello. Oh, is oh, okay. How do I turn it off? Maybe one of this. Hello. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, now that you guys have heard my name 1,000 times. So I'm Senior Development Planner with the district, and with me is my colleague, Holly Adams. And tonight we'll be providing a brief presentation on the proposed regulatory and process changes for outdoor customer service areas, commonly known as patios.
So first I'll provide a bit of background. Is this on? On what's happened so far with the district's temporary outdoor business area program and where we're at now in the process. So in May of 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Provincial Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch implemented what it calls temporary expanded service area authorizations. So these authorizations allowed liquor license holders to temporarily expand their service areas, which satisfied requirements for physical distancing. And about a month later, so in June 2020, the first point you see there on the timeline, the district implemented its temporary outdoor business area policy, which allowed larger patios to accommodate physical distancing. And we've had 27 businesses be approved to take advantage of the program. So both of the programs were extended a couple of times through the pandemic, but are scheduled to end by March 31st of this year. So that's the last point on the timeline there. And given the shifts in the last couple of years and the success of the temporary program, an opportunity arose for the district to modernize and improve its regulations, guidelines, and review procedures surrounding patios. And to get ahead of the March deadline, staff engaged local businesses and the overall community in October and November of last year in drafting new patio regulations. And these proposed changes are ready for council consideration tonight. Next, to dive into the strategy a bit more, when staff were creating this proposed new program and path forward, we kept these guiding principles in mind. So first, we want to continue to support our local businesses in recovering from the pandemic by increasing their options for patios and making the approval process simpler. We want to promote safe and accessible patios for our community, while also minimizing potential negative impacts of patios to neighbors, so like nuisance and noise, and negative impacts to public infrastructure. And last, patios are a great way to enhance street and community vibrancy, some more activated, lively streets and commercial centers. And I'm going to speak about the overall public engagement process and results, which were instrumental in shaping the proposed program. So there are two parts to the engagement. First, there was meetings with business owners, so of restaurants, bars, breweries, and second, there was a public survey. And this map just displays where the most temporary patios are concentrated for reference. So for the business outreach, staff invited the mentioned 27 approved permit holders and any business who had shown interest in the program to meetings grouped by business location and type. And just to briefly summarize, businesses were very supportive of the proposed changes, which will be highlighted later in the presentation. And the second arm of the public engagement was an online public survey, so open to anyone interested for 3 weeks in November. And the online survey received approximately 700 completed responses. So the two charts on the screen show there's strong support, so that's highlighted in green, the green bar, to both patios in general and also support for larger patios. So similar to the ones established during the pandemic. And the full survey results are attached to the report package too. And for interest, 3 key reasons people gave for liking patios included for the vibrancy and pedestrian atmosphere. So increased social opportunity, liveliness, pedestrian benefits such as walkability and safety. Second, for enjoyment of outside in nature. So we have beautiful views in the district to enjoy fresh air, being closer to nature. And third, for health reasons. So avoiding COVID-19 and other illnesses is less noisy than inside, easier to hear, and improve mental health. And next, Kevin is going to start going over some of the details of the program.
Thanks, Holly. So after completing the business and public engagement, staff finalized changes to the bylaws, regulations, and guidelines surrounding patios. Because existing patio regulations have been identified to be overly complicated and not conducive towards establishing successful outdoor patios, a number of changes were proposed for both the zoning bylaw and the business license bylaw. The details of these changes can be found in the report, but key takeaways are that the new set of regulations increase the permitted size of patios, permit more flexible configurations in terms of seats and tables on patios, include new accessibility requirements, which did not exist before, and lastly, address potential public and neighbor impacts and safety issues. To accompany these changes, staff have also drafted an outdoor customer service area guide. And similar to the district's coach house guide, this guide is intended to be a comprehensive document for any businesses wishing to establish a new patio or modify an existing patio. The guide contains key information such as eligibility criteria, design requirements, sample designs, process overview, and key cost considerations. So in essence, a one-stop shop for business owners. In addition to the regulatory changes, the district also aims to reduce the complexity and duration of patio approvals. The new streamlined process is on the left of the screen here. So what's improved? The first is consolidation with the business license. What this means is that if a business wants to establish a new patio or modify an existing patio, previously you had to make a standalone patio application. Now the patio proposal is appended to the business license, a process that every business already has to go through anyways. Second, there will be no additional fees triggered by adding a patio proposal to your business license. It is anticipated that the majority of patio applications will flow through this streamlined process. However, there may be some complex situations where additional building or development permits are required. In those cases, the standard fees will apply. To support this streamlined process, the district has put together a dedicated cross-departmental team to review such applications, ensuring quicker turnaround. We're also aware of the practical challenges faced by businesses, staffing shortages, supply chain disruptions, and other external factors. That's why staff are proposing a 6-month transition period spanning from the end of March to the end of September to accommodate businesses that are actively working on their proposal or require extra time to complete construction. So by September 30th of this year, all temporary pandemic patios are expected to be transitioned to permanent patios that are in compliance with the amended zoning bylaw and the amended business license bylaw. And lastly, staff are also proposing a request be sent to the LCRB to extend its authorization to match this district transition period. And that concludes my presentation here with Holly today. And beside us, we also have the General Manager of Planning, Properties and Permits, the Manager of Development Planning, and also our new Manager of Economic Development present to answer any questions for staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Back, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Zhang and Ms. Adams. I've been very supportive of the temporary patios. I think staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a seconder for the motion? Second by Councillor Ma. Councillor Back, go ahead with your comments, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I've been very supportive of the temporary patios. I think the pandemic especially, they were a lifeline for a lot of hospitality businesses in the community. Great to see the numbers of the survey, close to 700 people who weighed in on this with large support. And I think streamlining the process really does make sense. I was trying to recall some of the, a little bit of negative feedback that we may have heard in the community. I can really only recall a couple of instances, maybe one, I think in Deep Cove, there was an issue at the Raven with some noise there. I would hope that we can address those issues through things like our noise bylaw, but I think largely they have worked really well. And then it talked in the report about some vehicle disruptions, and sometimes that was referring to some of the patios in the city. But I think in the district, they have largely been successful, and I do support moving forward with a more streamlined process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ma, your comments?
Thank you. Generally, I'm very supportive of businesses in our community. The keys for me is that it is adding some vibrancy to the district, but it's not, overkill like late night clubs or something. I think it fits with the district. I also noticed and take note of the public support so far. But I do look forward to other comments during the public hearing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muir, your comments?
Thank you. I do think that this would have been a good one for a workshop, just to go through some of the impacts of, I think some of these issues have a lot of implications. And given that we've got a new council, I think, and we haven't been talking about this for a while, we did when we were implementing patios, and it was a bumpy process for some. We were trying to save businesses, and then we were trying to follow the liquor board regulations, and the provincial regulations didn't coincide necessarily with the liquor board regulations. It was a very challenging time, and so I appreciate the work that we're doing to make this easier and
Councillor, can I have you direct your microphone towards it? Thank you so much.
It used to be there, now I have to move it. But there are some implications. So page 8, for instance, I think it's page 8, or maybe it was the beginning. Oh no, it's it's the beginning of the report. It talks about patios separated from single family. But not all patios are created equal, as we know. For instance, Edgemont was not interested in expanding into the roadway for patios. They were not interested in going down that road when COVID hit. And yet the Cove did want to go in that direction. So patios separated from single family, but why not multifamily? If you look at the Raven, for instance, they did put a patio outside. They have one on Deep Cove Road that they've had for years, and they put one in during COVID in the back parking lot. That wouldn't be allowed under these new regulations because they would be impacted by single family. Now you say they need to be separated, but what does separate mean?
Mr. Zhang, is there a definition of separated in the bylaw?
Yes, so as proposed currently, through your worship, if the property is adjacent to single family residential, then the outdoor customer service area must be completely blocked from any ground level point on an abutting single family residential property.
So in what does that mean? A fence?
A completely impermeable wall or.
Oh, a
or
wall.
fence,
So it
yeah.
basically has to be in a building, but we don't even allow permanent structures on these outdoor patios. So
Yeah, I guess to address your concern around impact to single family or residential in general, I think there are other kind of mitigating aspects of this proposal. So the first is that any liquor primary would need endorsement from council. And secondly, the business license does have, the business license bylaw does give the inspector the ability to specify the operating hours of the business. So that's something that both council and staff can take into consideration when
Up to a
considering.
point, or is that open-ended?
It's open-ended.
So it's not, there isn't a hard and fast 11 o'clock throughout the district. It's whatever the inspector determines it to be for an
Yeah,
outdoor customer
exactly,
service space?
exactly.
a control inspector or us?
Us.
Okay, so these are the little nuances that
Mhm.
we've got to get right. And this is why I think this should have gone to a workshop, because I would ask you, if I was the owner of the Raven, could I come in and apply for a back patio where the COVID patio was in the back parking lot?
So that would have to go through council for their liquor license endorsement, in which case council could say that, no, we do not support it because of these following reasons. And without that support from council, they wouldn't be able to go to the LCRB for their liquor license for their backyard, or sorry, their back property patio.
So it's not necessarily separation, it is whether or not a liquor license would be able to be out on a patio next to single family. My next question would be, why isn't multifamily included in that? Because there's different forms of multifamily. So my example would be Gallant Avenue. So as we expand Gallant and we allow those businesses to expand their patios, they are now in the center of the road, and that sound will emanate up to second and third floor apartment buildings on both sides of the road that are very close to the road. It's not like a multifamily project in Sealand where, you know, they're 27 stories up or in concrete buildings and very far removed from patios that are down at street level. So, you know, there's a significant impact to those residents when we have an inspector that will make a decision on when a time for a patio closes. You know, so I think there's some, you know, issues with this, and I think we need to understand how we put in those hard and fast rules. You know, we've had over the years complaints from people that are standing, well, you know, there's, you know, kids in the summer and or groups of people that are at the bus stop, and we've had complaints of large groups waiting for buses to come down, you know, at 12:30 at night.
I think what Mr. Zhang is saying is that we already have the hammer. We already have, council already has the ability to make a case-by-case decision in those circumstances. Is that fair?
That's correct. And in addition to that,
The referral to the liquor licensing
But what if?
from council.
Okay, but what if those businesses don't have a liquor license and they have the patios outside and they're not drinking liquor, but it's still noise? It's still an impact on the local residences. When it's a little village setting, that impact is different from a larger, more urban area like Lynn Creek or Lower Capilano. Maybe Lower Capilano isn't even a very good
The
example.
McDonald's on Marine and Pemberton has an outdoor customer service area. What if they decided to 24 hours a day let customers go on there?
Exactly.
They don't need a liquor license for the outdoor customer service area, so we would no longer have the ability to set an hour of service on that customer service area. Is that?
I think Dan was going to add something, but I can also respond to that as well.
I'm getting into the minutia here, Mr. Milburn, but if you can assist us.
Your worship, just a couple of points of clarification. The terms and conditions of a business license and the ability of the license inspector to set hours of operation, that exists now for all businesses. So we use that as a tool in response to, say, nuisance complaints or other issues. We may look at limited hours of service. We're going to be reasonable, of course, in terms of applying that, but we have already have the ability to tailor it. And what Mr. Zhang was mentioning is that we think that's a very important and useful tool that could be applied in this case to deal with these discretionary concerns that may arise. I think it's clear that many of the applications that relate to potential noise consequence has a liquor component to it. And so we're essentially noting that we do have this additional layer of consideration through council. And the separation guideline that's within the guideline really talks about a physical barrier that would act as a noise attenuator. And so that, of course, wouldn't include someone doing some false wall or something low just to try to convince us it was acceptable. We use reasonable application of our approach in responding to these issues. The one final thing I'll note is we have sort of demonstrated success by reviewing, we almost pilot tested this with these temporary applications. And so we have a pretty good sense of the types of concerns that have been raised from neighbors, the types of opportunities that this could create. And so that's a good basis in which to prepare this guideline that is before you today. Thank you.
So I'm just going to take my other 2 minutes. So in the case of Deep Cove, right now we allow an omnibus, we have an omnibus bylaw that allows drinking in Panorama Park, Kate's Park, Sealand, etc. So what prevents the same scenario where you could buy a piece of pizza at Deep Cove Pizza, right, on Gallant, and then walk up the street? There'll be, I don't know how we're going to position those tables down there or how that's going to work. Is it going to be the businesses' tables? Or how is that patio going to be managed, where you are walking between businesses and one business has a liquor license where you can buy beer and get a salad, but then you kind of want to add pizza to it. So how is that part of it going to operate? Mr. Milburn is just saying that case by case, we can manage it. But in an area like Deep Cove or a larger plaza area, like our Lynn Valley Town Center, how are we going to deal with those types of impacts with hours, et cetera? One business might not be, have any issues because it's just food or it's takeout, but they still want to sit outside. Whereas another business, you're drinking, you're sort of moving in between an area. I just think that there's some impacts. I don't want to be reactive. I want to be proactive. I don't want to have to deal with the complaints later. I just want to deal with it now. So we're clear. We know we're respecting the residents. We're respecting the need for the businesses to, exist and evolve and grow. But we have to find that middle ground. And it shouldn't be about a bunch of complaints coming in. We should get this right. We should know from other areas in the region, that are populated, Commercial Drive, for instance, West 4th, all of those places where there are buildings, residential buildings above, how do they deal with those patio licenses and what are the restrictions?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Milburn, is your hand up for additional comments?
That's correct, Worship. Just wanted to note, and Mr. Joyce could speak this on a more detailed basis in terms of there is an ongoing design exercise and construction exercise for Lower Gallant that will provide some direction in terms of where the flexible spaces will occur. The important thing to note, though, in the case of the types of concerns that Councillor Murray raised, is if a business is looking for a temporary patio on district lands, council retains total control of that. And if there is inappropriate use on district lands, that license, the patio, can be pulled with 30 days notice at minimum under our licensing agreements. And we can specify any additional terms and conditions on top of the business licensing that we wish, using essentially our powers as the owners of the land. So it's important to know that council retains total control over the use of district lands in this process. Thank you.
Milburn, Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm certainly respectful of the comments of Councillor Murray. I'm supporting this going to first reading. I start from the perspective, these outdoor patios are widely supported. And while there may be the types of challenges and issues that we absolutely have to keep an eye out for, this proposal lies within a context, as I say, from my point of view, of widespread support for outdoor patios in the district. I think the regulations put forward, from my perspective, were broadly reasonable. I support the streamlined procedure, and to foreshadow a little bit the next item, I also support the delegation of approval of minor variances to staff so that these matters can be approved and move ahead. I procedurally also note that what we're talking about here is going to first reading. So we're talking about holding public hearings and public input opportunities. And I'm optimistic that in those we'll hear some of the concerns and challenges that perhaps we need to reflect on further, but I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a couple comments because we've sort of been around this when we brought them in temporarily. So I have a few comments and then I have a couple of clarifications that I would like. I think Councillor Murray, I had the same point that these are all, these patios are unique given their room, their circumstances, if they can add them or they can't add them. And I'm supportive of the temporary patios and definitely helping the businesses out. And I'm glad it's going to go to public hearing so that the public gets a chance to weigh in on this. But one concern I have is sort of the fairness for the businesses that can't or don't have the space for the patio extensions. And if we're going to do it permanent, then can you clarify for me that the businesses that will have patios will have fees associated with those patios? So it's not like when it was temporary, we didn't charge anything. Can you clarify that for me?
I think Dan was going to add a comment to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. If the patio space is wholly contained within the private property, they'd essentially be paying either their lease fees from their landlord, or they own the property and they can use the property in accordance with the guidelines provided. I think the question might relate to the use of district lands. So these are boulevards and other areas. So during the temporary period to support that COVID separation, the physical separation, council agreed to essentially eliminate those fees to really make sure that the business could stay successful even through challenging times. What we are recommending is, before final reading, coming back to council with a recommendation for essentially reinstituting the fees that were in place before COVID-19 with updates based on market rates. So we'll be providing a separate report to council before final reading, indicating how those fees could change. The current fees range in price of $3.09 to $3.71 a square foot, depending upon the infrastructure in place. But we'd be coming back to council with advice on current market rates before final reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. The other thing is, are we going to have design standards? I know there has to be some flexibility there, but I mean, beauty's in the beholder. I don't like the Lonsdale they look like a mishmash. They're getting better now, but it looks kind of like a mishmash. And I go over when I'm in Vancouver and I see them over there and they're pretty standardized. And so it looks pretty consistent and they look like they fit in better when they're more consistent. Are we going to have design standards that we're going to try and meet?
Yes, through your worship. Yes, we do have design guidelines as part of the outdoor customer service area guide. And I would say the guidelines mostly revolve around the physical nature. So we're talking about fence heights, clearances, awning coverage, etc. We are not dictating the kind of the appearance, say the colors or materials in the guide.
I would hope we'd kind of have some influence on that somehow, just to make it more synchronized, all of them. The other point that I wanted to make is 50% increase of total size. And if some of these patios extend into the parking area of the principal unit, then we're going to push that parking that would have been there in the parking lot out on the street. So I'm just making a general comment that I'm a bit concerned if we're adding 50% increase, that what's going to happen if it's involving a parking lot. And we're not requiring any parking for the extended patios. So we're essentially could be pushing all of the people who may need parking coming to these businesses out into the neighborhood. So I'm just bringing that up as a point. Deep Cove's been mentioned by Councillor Murray, and because everything's still in flex in Deep Cove, that's going to be a unique thing that we're going to have to deal with. And the one other thing is somebody sent me a picture today, a citizen sent me a picture today showing me pictures of the Deep Cove area last summer. Now I know things are going to change when it's permanent, but the businesses at that time, what I'm wondering is the businesses, I guess if it's on private land, they can do this, but not on district land. They had fenced off their area and somebody may have bought a Honey's donut and there was no seating outside of Honey's. And so they go next door and they sit in the seating that's for that business. Now, we can't control when it's on private, but when it's on district land, can that space be available for anybody? We're not segregating it just to the business? If it's our land.
Yeah, through your worship. So the work for regarding Deep Cove in general, the level of Deep Cove construction, well, that's just regarding the physical space, the pavers on the ground. That's all happening, starting construction soon and finishing. However, the use of the space on top is still to be determined. So we don't have the answer for that yet. I mean, it may very well be either segregated to businesses, or it could be used publicly for anyone or business to use kind of as a pool. But that work has not been done yet. And I think Mr. Bilburn also has something to add for that.
I think we explored that last time. And when the outdoor customer service area is a licensed space, it has to be segregated.
Yeah.
Is that not a reflection, Mr. Milburn?
That's correct, Your Worship. Certainly, if there's liquor service in the area, there needs to be some demarcation separation for that reason. Additionally, providing a license essentially provides some exclusive use to use those areas during the period of the license. However, it may be a unique circumstances in the Glant area, and I think we're looking forward to the discussion and the design that will occur with that process. And of course, council will be apprised of that. If there is some other kind of approach in terms of the flexible space to allow some commingling, we'll be speaking to the businesses about that and coming back with more details. That would be a separate process in addition to this.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that this is all still going forward and there's going to be input there, but I would recommend that it come back at a workshop rather than come back as a report to council right away. It needs to come back to a workshop. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so when in your initial presentation, Mr. Zhang, you said that the council still retains the ability to hammer effectively, or maybe those are my words, to to affect the license at the time the license is issued. So if somebody has a new application, then the council would be able to come along and say whether they support it or not to the Liquor Control Board. And we can use any number of different reasons to support it or oppose it under those circumstances. Or we can apply conditions to it under those circumstances. Okay, and so I guess my question is, the existing businesses, we don't rehear their license. And so is that suggesting that everybody that currently already has an outdoor customer service area that is licensed would no longer have the ability for the council to come in and set conditions and timeframes because their license is already issued? Or do those licenses have a sunset clause, which means there would be a future opportunity for council to consider those conditions?
Mr. Milburn has an answer for this as well.
Your Worship, this is a question for the licensing officer. This is and really comes down to the powers enabled through the Local Government Act charter and in particular council's business license bylaw. So in the bylaw in particular, council has the authority to control the terms and conditions as a right for obtaining, continuing to hold, and receiving a renewal. So those conditions, terms and conditions, can be set at any point. And you don't just have to rely on the conversations and what was known at the time of initial issuance. If new issues emerge during the period of the license in operations that we need to respond to and adapt to, the business license tool gives us that flexibility to respond to that issue at that time.
Okay. I seem to recall it was down by the Deep Cove Brew. There, we had to amend the license because of the noise that was happening to the property owners to the north of that site. So I seem to recall we have done that before. But out of all of the examples, I think Councillor Back said it off the top, the only complaints I've really heard through the piloting process and through the emergency response process was about the Raven. And I think that that's pretty easily explainable. I mean, the Arms Reach, typically their last dinner setting shows up at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, and then they wrap up by 9 or 9:30. With the Raven, you are in a residential area and you have people arriving till 11 o'clock at night to the venue. And so they're adding new noise, new energy to the outdoor customer service space at a later time. So I would have some concerns about us not proactively setting a time limit on the outdoor customer service in an area so close to single family houses, a space or multifamily, but a space like Wild Eye and Toby's down in the commercial light industrial area. I don't really have a concern about the impact on neighboring businesses, and if they have customers that tend to arrive at a later time, I don't think that that's as much of a concern. So we're try to be strategic as far as opening up as much time as we possibly can without it having a negative impact on the neighboring areas. But I think that I'm going to be supportive of this going to the prescribed steps that we have here in the staff recommendation. But public hearing and public input opportunity, because it sounds like we still have the ability to change a license at any point we want to in future. I did just as my own input piece, I happen to think that we also should be providing more public benches and tables that are outside of customer service area limits, that are outside of licensed spaces, simply because we have lots of people in our community that need to sit down and eat a bag sandwich as well, that aren't going to be paying for a restaurant and should still have a comfortable place to sit in our community. So I'd like to see us pursue more benches and public tables and sitting and eating areas as well. But I'm satisfied that there's still enough controls available to us through the licensing process to respond to concerns that come up in the community. I think the piloting and emergency response has been fairly effective and welcome in the community. So I'm going to be supporting this recommendation and referring the matter to a public hearing and public input opportunity for the subsequent bylaw.
Could we just ask staff to tell us how they're going to be advertising this public hearing, given that there's a whole bunch of different areas throughout the municipality that are impacted? How a sign, for instance, is going to go out?
I'm going to let Catherine Pope speak. She's on the speakers list, and then I will come back on some of the particulars on a public hearing as well. Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I totally support this. I think we've have seen it in action in the last 2 years. People love them. And in fact, I think many people would say it's one of the best things to have come out of COVID. I like what it's done for the communities that have them. And I would like to see it move forward to a public hearing. I am interested in hearing from people who live, directly beside some of these. I am concerned about the noise, but I feel very reassured that we have the tools to respond to nuisance complaints or disturbances, and we can respond to those on a case-by-case basis. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers, so I'm going to call, so the question was asked about protocol for advertising the public hearing and public input opportunities. This is obviously one of general interest to the whole community, as well as I think it's 13 or 14 specific properties that took advantage of it. What's the strategy for advertising the public hearing in this? Yeah. We'll be advertising at the 13 existing outdoor customer service areas as well as newspaper advertising, or what's the plan on that?
I'll defer to the municipal clerk for that.
Okay, Genevieve Lance.
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship, as the rezoning affects 10 or more parcels owned by 10 or more persons, there'll be no mail out. However, there will be advertisements in the North Shore News and signage placed throughout the district, and also, I believe, social media organized through the communications.
Signage placed throughout the district means signage placed in the areas that currently have
I would-
licensed outdoor customer service areas?
I will need to refer to the bylaw in order to confirm the exact placement of it, but there will be a statutory notice undertaken.
And over and above what the bylaw prescribes, we can put signs anywhere it makes sense for us to put signs on that. And I think this is one that we want to make sure that those 13 or 14 areas that took advantage of this are properly signed. Odds are it's going to mean the fans of those areas are going to show up as well. And it doesn't always mean criticism, but I think that that's a fair way to do it.
I'm just curious if I could ask a question about that.
You have a second time to speak. You're welcome to take the floor for another 2 minutes if you'd like.
I'm just curious, do we advertise on social media at all for these public hearings?
My understanding is that we do.
Pardon me?
My understanding is that we do advertise.
We do.
I'll defer to the municipal clerk.
Yes, sorry, through your worship. The statutory notice is not required on social media. However, communications does have a strategy to advertise council proceedings and meetings through their social media accounts.
But in addition to the notice for the entire meeting,
Yes, it's different. There's the statutory notification, which is prescribed in the Local Government Act and the Community Charter. Communication, social media is not prescribed in the legislation, however, is undertaken by the Communications
Yeah.
Department in addition to the statutory notice.
so yes, we do on our Facebook page have a splash that says public hearing Tuesday night, and then you see the further details that are on it.
But what happens sometimes is you see the social media post on Wednesday morning and you've missed the Tuesday night public hearing because of the algorithms of social media.
Yeah, I'm on a couple of different social media
Yeah.
sites, and I have not seen them. They have not come across, even though I follow it. So I think that's something we could make a bit more of an effort.
Okay, Mr. Milburn, I see your hand up.
Also wanted to note that we'll be reaching out to the folks that if they left their contact information with us during the consultation process, we'll forward the information to them just as a batch email so that they're made aware. These are members of our community that have expressed an interest, self-selected, and so by reaching out to them, we can make sure that we get the word out. And just the final thought, there were many comments that the council had with respect to noise. Staff will make sure to provide council before the public hearing a bit of an inventory of the hours of operation of the existing temporary facilities so that council can consider that when the application comes forward. We think that additional information would be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further speakers, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Thank you, staff, for your presentation here tonight. The next item, and sorry, do we have a date planned for that public hearing that we just referred to?
Yes, thank you through your worship. It's tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 21st.
Right, and Tuesday, okay, we'll have to wait and affirm that in the agenda in that week, but that sounds like that's a pretty solid date, so. Okay, moving on to item 8.3. And I'm gonna just, Councillor Hanson, you're the acting mayor right now. I'm gonna step out for a bio break. I think that's two members of council that are just outside of the door for a minute. Perhaps we could just take 2 minutes and switch up and be back in a couple minutes. Okay. Gavin, you? And and then they took away my gummy bears because it wasn't healthy enough for those meetings. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everybody. As we say, sitting is the new smoking. We have to force ourselves to stand up and have a stretch and get a little bit of exercise, especially at this time of night. And so appreciate you bearing with us while we have a bit of a bio break here in the council chamber. And so at this point, we're going to move on to item 8.3. This is the development variance permit delegation. And we have Yan Zhang here and Emil Norden. And so I'm going to turn the matter over to Yan Zhang, please.
Thank you. Your worship, members of council, I will provide a brief overview of this item. So this is a DVP delegation bylaws. Staff tonight are proposing bylaw amendments to the development procedures bylaw mainly for council consideration to facilitate delegation of minor variances to the general manager of planning and properties and permits. And as you know, council, that we currently already have delegated building permit, sorry, not building permit, development permit and temporary use permit. Both are minor in nature. So the LGA, the Local Government Act, was recently amended to allow council the power to delegate decision-making on minor variances to staff. And so the LGA, in allowing council to do this, also ask the district to define, the municipality to define what minor means. So what is qualified as a minor variance, and also requires that the municipality to establish criteria, decision-making criteria that staff will use in evaluating minor DVPs. So that's what we're proposing tonight. Emil Norton will go over the very high level concept, and we're very much looking forward to questions and discussions and directions.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council and members of the public. I'm Emil Norden with the Development Planning Department. And I have a fairly short presentation regarding the recommended bylaw amendments to facilitate delegation of minor development variants to staff for consideration. So the bylaws recommended for consideration are bylaw 8610, which proposes to amend the district's development procedures bylaw by establishing procedures for the delegation of minor DVPs to the general manager of planning, properties, and permits. And bylaw 8611, which proposes to amend the district's fees and charges bylaw by adding a new reduced fee for delegated minor DVPs. While not related to the delegation of minor DVPs, the bylaw amendment also includes a new design review fee for major projects exempt from the requirement for a development permit. As this is a minor fee update that supports development process improvements, it was included within this bylaw amendment. And related to the bylaws, an amendment to the district's corporate policy on non-statutory public consultation for development applications is also proposed to establish public notification requirements for delegated DVPs. For a bit of background, in 2018, the province initiated a development approvals process review, which was aimed at identifying improvements to the municipal and provincial processes required for land development and to facilitate faster delivery of needed housing. The review resulted in a set of recommendations in 2019, and in 2021, the province gave royal assent to Bill 26, which brought the first legislative changes arising from the review. These changes included the addition of Section 498.1 of the Local Government Act, which enables councils to delegate decision-making on development variance permits to staff if the proposed variance is minor, and if it varies the land use regulations as outlined in the Local Government Act. And if a council wishes to delegate the consideration of minor variances to staff, they must establish by bylaw criteria for determining whether a proposed variance is minor and guidelines the delegate must consider in deciding whether to issue the variance. This slide provides a very brief overview of development variance permits, or DVPs. A DVP is a discretionary land use tool governed under Section 498 of the Local Government Act. They help to address necessary deviations from the typical requirements of the zoning bylaw and other land use regulation bylaws in order to facilitate developments or improvements to a property where siting restrictions or unique circumstances make it difficult to meet those requirements. A variance may not be utilized to make changes to use, density, residential rental tenure, and phase development agreements. These can only be granted through amendments to the bylaw or agreement, which are in council's sole authority. Over the past 10 years, the district received 85 development variance permit applications, ranging from between 4 to 12 applications per year, an average of 9 per year. Most variances pertain to development on single-family properties, primarily related to the construction of new houses and accessory buildings, additions, and coach houses. But there are also occasional variance requests for non-single family properties, typically related to parking, siting, signage, and size of permitted use. The Development Procedures Amendment Bylaw proposes criteria for determining whether a proposed variance is minor, as well as guidelines the delegate must consider in deciding whether to issue a DVP in accordance with the Local Government Act. In terms of criteria, it's proposed that a delegated DVP be defined as minor if it varies the following provisions permitted by the LGA: the siting, size, and dimensions of buildings, structures, and permitted uses, off-street parking and loading space requirements, the regulation of signs, and screening and landscaping requirements. And in order to be considered minor, the variance must not be associated with an amendment to the OCP or zoning bylaw or any other proposed bylaw amendments under preparation, a non-delegated development permit, housing agreement, HRA, or phase development agreement, works completed without the necessary permits or approvals or otherwise in contravention of district bylaws, non-conforming buildings or other structures or non-conforming use of building structures and land, or protected heritage property, and they shall not be associated with or required as a condition of subdivision. Based on these proposed criteria alone, it's anticipated that just over half, or approximately 5 minor DVPs per year may be delegated for consideration by the general manager. It should be noted that staff will be reporting back to council at the February 13th council workshop regarding housing options for single-family neighborhoods and potential changes to the coach house, recommended changes to the coach house program, and associated guidelines will be discussed at that time. So until council directs staff otherwise, variances related to coach houses will continue to proceed to council for consideration. Now that I've covered the criteria for minor DVPs, I'll provide some examples of the types of minor variances that could be delegated on both single family and non-single family properties. So on single family properties, the types of minor DVPs which could be delegated to the general manager include variances to siting, setbacks, building depth, size, but no change in overall permitted density, height, and parking as they relate to the construction of a new or addition to an existing house or an accessory building or structure. And to just give a few examples with some imagery of recent variances approved by council, we have the construction of a house. So this may require variances to height or setbacks. For example, if the property is sloped or the house needs to be sited away for an environmentally sensitive area, for example. There may also be variances related to an addition of a house. So for example, the enclosure of a carport or garage addition, which may require variances to setbacks or building depth. The construction of an accessory building or structure such as a fence or retaining wall, which may require a variance to size, siting, or height. This was a proposal recently approved by council for a retaining wall. Or lastly, where there's insufficient space to meet parking requirements to accommodate a secondary suite or addition to an existing house, a parking variance may be required. So this was a recent addition to a house to accommodate a suite, and there wasn't sufficient space for 3 parking spaces, so there was a parking variance approved on the property. So for non-single family properties, the types of minor DVPs which could be delegated to the general manager include variances to siting, setbacks, building depth, size, where there's no change in density, height, parking, signage, screening, and landscaping related to the minor development or use of an existing non-single family building. Siting could be related to a classroom addition on a school property or a small addition such as a patio enclosure on a low-rise, older multifamily development, both of which might have existing siting area plans registered on the property that restrict the building footprint and siting. So a variance to the siting area plan might be required in those instances for those minor additions. Another example is a minor variance to the size of a permitted use on a property, but no change in overall permitted density. So for example, a minor variance to the size of an office use that's permitted on a property may be able to be accommodated. A variance to off-street parking or loading space requirements for an existing building may arise. For example, staff occasionally receive inquiries from seniors residential buildings that have evolving parking needs over time as residents age, and they might need more space for mobility aid storage versus vehicle parking. So those kind of minor parking variances may occur. Variances to signage. So for example, large development sites that have signage needs that aren't necessarily contemplated by the sign bylaw do occasionally require variances to the size, number, and placement of signs. Council did review a couple of those examples recently. So those come up from time to time. And one further example related to the prior council item is variances pertaining to outdoor customer service areas or patios. On constrained sites, there may be instances where these require variances to parking, siting, size, setbacks, or landscaping and screening. So those are just some examples. So to further clarify where development variance permits cannot be delegated to staff, these include any proposal under council authority. So related to, we already mentioned, OCP amendment, rezoning, major development permit, housing agreement, HRA or phase development agreement. And to further clarify, any new building or major addition on a non-single family property that does not qualify as a minor development permit under the OCP cannot be delegated. And any works completed without permit or approvals. Any works related to existing non-conforming buildings. For an example of that might be where there's a pre-existing setback non-conformity. A delegated DVP process cannot be utilized to bring that conformity into compliance or to further vary that non-conformity. A variance is related to subdivision, for example, a variance to lot dimensions or setbacks. Variance is related to a protected heritage property. And as mentioned, variance is related to coach houses, which will remain under council authority. So the Development Procedures Amendment Bylaw also establishes the requirement that the general manager must consider guidelines set out in Schedule B to the bylaw in deciding to issue a delegated DVP. These consideration guidelines would be used to establish consistent guidance and fairness in the evaluation of all minor DVP proposals. Some examples can include consideration of reasons why the bylaw cannot be met, consideration of neighbor input received, the context, anticipated impacts and proposed mitigation measures, whether the proposal maintains the general intent and purpose of the OCP and the land use regulation bylaw being varied, and whether the proposed development is appropriate for the site. These are just a few of the examples, but they're all listed there in the schedule. Each proposal will be evaluated based on its unique circumstances and in consideration of these guidelines and the criteria. As is the case with other delegated permits, such as minor development permits and temporary use permits, the general manager would exercise professional judgment and retain the ability to elevate a request to council for consideration. There may be instances where the proposal complies with the criteria set out in the Development Procedures Bylaw, but upon consideration, the general manager just decides to elevate the request to council. One example might be where there's significant public interest or concern raised regarding a proposal. The approval process currently for development variance permits includes 6 steps. So starting with staff review, public consultation, council meeting scheduling, council report preparation, statutory notification, and ultimately a council meeting with a decision made by council. And this process typically requires between 4 to 6 months to complete, with a median processing time of 26 weeks. The proposed process for delegated minor DVPs includes 3 steps, which include staff review, public consultation, and a decision by the general manager of planning, properties, and permits. It's anticipated that DVPs with decision-making delegated to staff would see processing times reduced by approximately 6 weeks from the current time frame for DVPs considered by council. And this time savings is attributed to a streamlined process for delegated DVPs that will not include council meeting scheduling, council report preparation, and statutory notification prior to consideration of issuance. Under the LGA, the statutory notification is not required for delegated DVPs. However, staff are proposing an amendment to the district's non-statutory notification policy to ensure neighbors receive a notification letter and are consulted regarding the proposals for delegated minor DVPs, similar to the existing consultation process for DVPs and other minor land use permits. This would provide the opportunity to consider any neighbor concerns and work with the proponent to mitigate any anticipated impacts consistent with the current approach for DVPs considered by council. This streamlined approach would see the processing time for delegated DVPs reduced to an average of 20 weeks or less, with an approximately 25% increase in processing efficiency. As with delegated minor DPs and temporary use permits, the property owner is entitled to submit a written request for council to reconsider a matter within 10 days of the decision made by the general manager. And as outlined in the Development Procedures Bylaw Amendment, an applicant for a delegated permit will not be permitted to reapply for reconsideration of a refused permit by the general manager within 1 year of the date of refusal. So a development approvals review process for the district is currently in the planning stages, and staff will be reporting back to council at a workshop in early 2023 on that. This will be an end-to-end review from inquiry through to post-occupancy permit, which will aim to enhance current processes and advanced OCP implementation. And the proposed streamlined review process for minor variances is initial step towards improving process efficiencies. In conclusion, Bylaw 8610 proposes an amendment to the district's development procedures bylaw, and Bylaw 8611 proposes an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw. Should the bylaws be adopted, an amendment to the district's corporate policy on non-statutory public consultation for development applications is recommended for approval. And should council approve the bylaw and policy amendments, it's recommended that the new staff delegated DVP consideration process be reviewed 1 year following adoption of the bylaw amendments. This will provide the opportunity to review and revise the procedures as required. With that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for your time, and staff, Mr. Milburn, Ms. Zhang, and myself are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. You know, having looked over this and considered the times that we have considered development variance permits as a council over my last, going back to 2005, I'd say I'm open to the general manager exercising some discretion in those cases. Yeah, I note that in the report, it wasn't in the presentation, but in the report, it says that people would still have the ability to appeal to council if they disagree with the decision of the approving officer in these cases. So we still would have council oversight, at least on the negative, which is to say that the person was rejected and therefore we could consider it still. We obviously would be abrogating our duty in if the approving officer to approve matters. I'm willing to support first and second reading, but I have a problem with the wording. I think there's a clear contradiction that I think is going to cause us some problems down the road. So if you go to slide number 5, which reflects page 110 in the package, page 2 in the report. No, got slide. Maybe I got the slide number 4. Maybe. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, hold on.
Next.
One? No.
Next. Well, sort of. That starts it. That's phrase varies certain land use regulations as outlined in the LGA. You have a later slide that actually goes into detail on that. There it is. Okay. And so this is my concern that I have with the way that it's written in the report, which is what would become the bylaw content. And so in it, it's the first bullet. So we're talking about criteria that could be approved by the general manager in this case. So they would be both minor in scope, and in this one, the first bullet says citing size and dimensions of building structures and permitted uses. So minor permitted use change would be allowed. Can you go to slide 7, please? Or sorry, the next slide. Next one. Okay, I'm gonna have to go to the report because I have it in the report. You had one point in here that said that very specifically changes in use are not permitted. And so we have a clear contradiction.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Cannot be
No, that
delegated.
cannot be delegated. So in this one, it says obviously that, I don't see the word use on it. May not be, there you go, that was it, right at the bottom. Make changes to use. So in one part of it, you say that minor changes to use are permitted, and another part of it, you say any changes to use are not permitted. That collision is gonna burn us time and time again. Now, when I went and talked to Mr. Milburn this morning, he said, well, what it would probably be related to is just simply citing. So that there's a bullet that says, it's under number 2 sub, and it says, the zoning bylaw respecting citing size and dimensions of building structures and permitted uses. And so what it would be saying is that you're not changing the use, you're changing where the use can be cited within the parcel. And I don't think that we have that laid out correctly to say that. I think what it's saying right now is that minor changes in use and density are allowed and no changes in uses and density are allowed. And so I think there's a clear and direct collision in the wording of the bylaw. And so I'm inclined to support first and second, but refer the matter back to staff for a change to clarify that, because I think the actual intent is that you would not be changing the use on the whole parcel. You might be moving around the use from different portions of siting in the parcel. And I don't think that's what it says. But I think that's the intent. So I guess I go to you, Emil Norton. Yeah.
Your worship, if you'll allow, I could try to clarify. So perhaps how it's written in the report isn't clear. A delegated DVP can only vary the siting, size, and dimensions of building structures and permitted uses. So the siting, size, and dimensions of a permitted use, not the actual use itself, the type of use.
It says and. It should say of.
I see what you're saying. However, the bylaw itself refers to section 498.1 of the Local Government Act, which lays out the cases where a variance can be varied. But you're saying
it still says it can vary permitted use, though, which is in clear collision with the later part that says it's not allowed.
Mr. Milburn, did you have something to
Mr. Milburn.
Your worship, the staff have used the language in the Local Government Act in the section.
Yeah.
And it is correct that actually the only potential delegated authority related to zoning is the siting, size, and dimension of. So the act actually doesn't give any other power to either council actually or staff to vary. So that would include changing one land use to another land use. That is not a variable regulation by council or staff.
Then it should strike the phrase use.
And staff have tried to use, and I think what might be useful is the segmentation of siting, size, and dimension of, and then a separate bullet dealing with buildings and other structures and uses that are permitted on the land. So the act actually is, I think, more readable, and we can come back and provide that clarification so there isn't any misinterpretation in application.
That one would be a big collision for people who genuinely do want to change the use and are finding an avenue to avoid council to do it. So let's be clear about that.
And any bylaw we would write wouldn't change the statute. That's still, it would be in place. And we certainly don't want to create
a couple of developments come to mind.
and if your worship, if you're having challenges with it, others will as well. So we want to make sure we have clear wording.
I really appreciate that. So I thought you described it well this morning on how it's about moving the use amongst the site, not changing the use necessarily. And so if there's a better way to represent that in there, I'm looking for it. Sorry, I moved first. Was there a seconder on first? First and second? You're seconding first and second? Councillor Mary? Okay, Councillor Mary, your comments, and then Councillor Ma.
Well, I concur with the mayor's observations in regards to the language. I think that's, obviously we have to get this clear, so it's clear in everybody's mind. But but certainly it's, for the very few that we get. Do we have a table where the vast majority of those variances were passed?
We only had one.
That was sent back?
I can check.
Was not passed? I think the vast majority of those variances were all passed.
I can't recall one.
Your worship, I believe there was one application which did not proceed. I'm
Right.
not sure if it wasn't approved or they withdrew.
Okay, so the vast majority of them, and certainly the complexity of our schedule is challenging for some. I note that the addition, I think that was in relationship to the variance up in Blue Ridge, and it was waiting in line to get approved, and I think they haven't even started building yet. So it is challenging, and I think that we're very optimistic that this is going to speed things forward, but there's all sorts of other challenges that we need to address as well. So we know, but certainly this is a step forward, and I am supportive of going second reading as long as we can clarify that wording. And I wanted to compliment you on the presentation. It was a very good, clear presentation, except for that word and of, and we'll get that dealt with next week.
Thanks very much.
But I appreciate just addressing every single thing that we could have asked. Now I have no more questions.
Now just for first and second for all of the pieces that are before us. Councillor Ma.
I would support the motion. Generally, I would support anything that, reduces processing time. And I like the idea that there's a reduced rate for, the delegated variance, development variance permits. There are some questions that were answered, but I just want to confirm something. I think you mentioned, or through your worship, you mentioned that there were 85 minor DVP over like a span of 10 years. Is that right? Or did I read it wrong?
130. It was about 14 per year, I think is what it said in the report.
That can clarify your worship.
Oh, sorry, those were the ones that went to the Board of Variance, was 14 per year, 134 over 10 years or something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an understanding of how many minor ones in that period. And I think, were you alluding to that most of them passed, except for one?
Through your worship, just to clarify the question, is that the number of minor variances that were considered by council of any nature over the past 10 years? So the report says over the past 10 years, 85 development variance permits are considered by council. That's all, the total. And upon a review of the type of variances, it seems like approximately 50%, 50 to 60% were minor in nature, so may have the potential to be delegated to staff.
And
So that would approximately 40 or 50.
And I'm just curious of those ones that were minor or minor in nature, most of them passed?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a big risk. Yeah, okay. I also like the appeal process because, coming before council, you got, 7 people that might have an opinion on something as opposed to potentially, 1 or 2. No offense. And this, when I look at that wording that you mentioned, if I look at that first point, if I made it 3 different points, like sightings, size and dimensions of buildings as 1, sighting, size and dimension of structure as 2, right? And then the third point would be sighting, size and dimensions of permitted uses. Does that eliminate that concern that you have?
I think the way Ms. Norton mentioned it, that of permitted use, the citing of permitted use, not a change in permitted use, would be clearer for what I was trying to achieve. I think you have to just clarify that you're not actually changing use, you're just moving the use around on the site.
Citing of permitted uses.
Of permitted uses, not a change to permitted uses.
Right. So, okay, it'd be interesting to see what you come back with, but generally I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Councillor Murray, did you already speak? Yeah. Okay, so Councillors Hanson and back. Councillor Hanson.
Yep, thank you very much. I'm pleased to support amending the development procedures bylaw to enable greater delegation of minor development variance permit applications to staff. I agree with you, Mayor Little, that we need to clarify the use of the word use and make sure that, I think we all understand the way in which that word is being used, but we need to be very careful in terms of our wording. I certainly support this proposal as a means to streamline the process. Something that we have heard in the community recently is an appetite for greater efficiency in the district, and this would be a step in the direction of that greater efficiency. It also, from my point of view, has the benefit of avoiding council being distracted from some of the larger issues and larger deliberations, but by some of these more procedural or housekeeping matters that come before us from time to time. I note that I personally would support an expansion of delegation to staff with respect to coach house variances. I think there's enough clarity from council decisions now that we have a set of rules that could be followed by staff with respect to variances to permit coach houses. I note, as Councillor Ma did, that parties have the right to reconsideration by council, so there's no fundamental rights taken away from applicants. And I note also that the program is to be reviewed within 1 year. So if there's issues or it isn't going the way we hope, we can always reconsider it. So happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Back, your comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the detailed presentation that really did answer a lot of the questions that I had. And like my colleagues, I'll be supporting this motion as well. I think anything we can do to streamline and reduce processing times for variances like minor variances like this should be looked at. It struck my attention when it said up to 6 months is the wait time currently for a minor variance. Granted, this may not increase it, a lot, but 23% increase potentially is a lot for somebody waiting to do a minor project. Also want to note that staff, general manager, still has the option to elevate one of these variances to council if they decide to. And like Councillor Hanson, I would like to see this evolve to include coach houses being delegated as well. I think, as Councillor Hanson has said, we've seen a number of those come to council, and we have been supportive, I think, every single time. So I look forward to that discussion that's coming up, but very happy to support this. Thank you.
Yeah. First and second. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Back, for your comments. I see no further speakers at this time. Just want to clarify with the clerk, moved and seconded. Is first and second reading for all matters, although I did want to clarify that the last item, and I don't have the wording in front of me here. At the wrong table here. It says, and that subject to adoption of bylaws 8610 and 811, a proposed amendment to non-statutory public consultation for development application policies is approved. I just want to be clear with staff. Does that require approval of the first two items and completion of the first two items? Therefore, we should wait for that to be considered at the next meeting? Or can that be passed and approved independently without reliance on the first two clauses?
Given the way the recommendation is worded, it's conditional.
It's conditional.
So if council
at this point, we're issuing first and second reading on the first two items, and we're tabling the third item until after we finalize the first two items.
Or could deal with the matter now, and it would fall away if the first two items aren't approved.
So approve it conditionally on it.
It's a conditional recommendation, so it becomes moot if council never approves the first two. So
I would accept that as friendly. I think second. So that's the understanding of the mover and seconder. So I see no further speakers on the matter. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, the next item up for discussion is item 8.4. This is the reports by council representatives on board committees corporate policies. And the recommendation has been moved. I'll be seconding the recommendation. Any comments on the recommendation?
No, I think Mr. Gordon, when we were talking about this prior to this report being brought forward, clarified this policy has not been reviewed since 1995. And it was really set up in regards to primarily labor relations originally. As the rep for the district on Metro Vancouver, council has an opportunity to attend the 3 sessions that will be scheduled this year for Council of Councils, where each department in Metro Vancouver makes a presentation. There's an opportunity for questions. It's unrealistic for anyone, certainly the mayor making a report on TransLink or the Mayor's Council, Metro Vancouver. Like what I've done in the past is just, identify things that are pertinent to the municipality. But there's 8 agendas on that board meeting, and it would be, an entire evening to be able to update you on every single thing that doesn't actually apply to the municipality. Generally, the reporting structure over the years in the district has been councillors on district committees that report back on things that are pertinent, and it has sort of morphed into events. We talk about Remembrance Day events and events at Parkgate or in the village up in Lynn Valley, and as interest to the community. So as far as the Metro Vancouver presentations, I think it's in your best interest to attend those council meetings. I think you'll get a lot out of it, and you can now come in by hybrid or attend in person, and you get sort of a feel as to what goes on at Metro and how we're impacted. So
thank you very much. And also the committee meetings have meeting minutes produced, and they're publicly available on the public portions of those meetings. But I would recommend that people avail themselves of the Council of Councils. It's a really condensed opportunity to be able to get really the dashboard, as it were, on Metro Vancouver's operations, because you go through each of the budget presentations department by department, their work plans for the next quarter, and it's a fairly information dense opportunity to understand where Metro Vancouver is at. I believe the next one is planned. They changed the date. I think they changed it to April 1st. Yeah. Maybe it's just a joke.
We don't want to
We'll
talk
find
about
out
the
when it
date
starts
of
there, but
that
it's
and why
April
they
1st.
picked that date. There used to be 4 and there's 3 this year. I am gonna just take a little opportunity to talk about recently there was several newspaper articles and some media coverage in regards to the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. And Mr. Stewart is, I think I can speak for Mr. Stewart in this sense that there's some things that need review in regards to the communication structure at Metro Vancouver and several other things. And we're working on that with the new board, Chair George Harvey and the Vice Chair John McEwen, from the Mayor of Anmore and the Mayor of Delta. And I will say that it's very challenging as a director and all those appointed to committees. Just like the structure here in the District of North Vancouver, when we're bound by confidentiality. And we're through Metro, we're looking at a review, because at one time in Metro's history, the CAOs had access to all of the agendas, the 8 agendas that were presented based on the boards, the water board, the sewage board, and the main board. And that no longer is the case. The director is the only one with that information, and the alternate, which is the mayor. And so I will say to you, council, that the fact that the information that was released because of a court case in regards to our sewage treatment plant that was being filed by Metro Vancouver, the fact that you had to find out about that on the news, which is really how you found out about it, was beyond my control of being able to advise you prior to that writ being filed in the Vancouver court system. And so that is one of the very challenging situations that we find ourselves in with a concern around Metro to protect confidentiality and to make sure that it is contained. But at the same time, the directors being able to communicate with their CAOs and their councils on things that are impacting the local community. So a very challenging situation, and one that we're hopefully going to be addressing with this new board and this new chair and vice chair, and we'll be able to communicate more fully between our staff, our local municipal staff, and our council, so you have up-to-date information.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers on the matter. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Sorry, Councillor Forbes, did I cut you off? Were you hoping to speak on that matter?
To the new counselors, what I found most frustrating is exactly what Lisa's talking about, that a lot, and I asked you about it in the first term I was here. A lot of the business over there is done in closed meetings.
Yes.
So we can't get reports to council. We don't even know what's going on. And then the public comes to us and said, how come we didn't know about this? And I go, well, I didn't know about it either. You know, so I just wanted to reinforce what Councillor Murray is saying, that I really hope the communication gets better from Metro.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item is item 8.5. This is the Lynn Canyon Pay Parking Pilot Program. And we have Stephanie and Nicole. Engineering, you had opening comments on this one?
Actually, I just given this unusual times, I don't know if our new Parksman Director, Stephanie Warner, has been in front of council. So this is Stephanie, and she's going to have some opening remarks for council. And then Nicole, who is familiar to council, Parks Planner, is going to provide a short 10-slide presentation to introduce the topic.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've been working together for a long time, so it's weird to say welcome to your first council meeting, but welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you for the warm welcome and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. This evening, we are pleased to report to you the results of the Pay Parking Pilot Program that has been in place in Lynn Canyon Park since May 2021. The results of the pilot program show that seasonal pay parking has been an effective tool for managing parking demand in and around Lynn Canyon Park, while also improving visitor experience overall. Tonight, staff are seeking direction to continue the pay parking program at Lynn Canyon Park and to begin exploring the feasibility of introducing pay parking programs for similarly popular parks within the district, including Deep Cove, Panorama, and Kate's Way Awitchin, where we see comparable park season parking demands, as well as visitation trends. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole now for our presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Nicole Foth, Parks Planner with the Parks Department. This presentation, as Stephanie was saying, is to report back to council following a 2-year pilot program of pay parking in Lynn Canyon Park, and this presentation is about 5 minutes. Pay parking is a transportation demand management tool to address busy parking areas with limited parking spaces, such as Lynn Canyon Park. Pay parking is an incentive to encourage more turnover in parking spaces. This provides more park visitors who drive to access the park and improve the overall visitor experience. It also can encourage visitors to come in other ways, and Lynn Canyon Park is accessible by walking, transit, biking, and taking rideshare, for example. A number of plans and policies identify pay parking as a tool to manage high parking demand and to encourage walking, cycling, and transit options. From the OCP to climate action to parks and transportation, pay parking supports several district goals. Following the parking lot circulation upgrade in 2020, Council approved a pay parking pilot for Lynn Canyon Park.
to manage parking demand during peak season and collect parking information and feedback. The pilot ran for 2 years, 2021 and 2022, with a pay season from March 1st to October 31st to capture the busiest months at the park. During these months, paid parking hours were 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and parking is free outside of those hours and the season. A pilot district resident pay parking exemption pass was introduced. The seasonal pass provides district residents an exemption from hourly parking fees. Along with the pilot, on-street parking regulations were coordinated to minimize impacts to the adjacent neighborhood. Improvements made during the pilot include extending the maximum parking duration from 3 to 4 hours to support programs at the Ecology Center and adding an app to pay by phone. Staff are working on a number of upcoming improvements that are listed here as we continue to improve the visitor experience at the park. Last summer, staff conducted a park visitor intercept survey at various locations throughout the park. We heard from 87 respondents, and at the time of survey, we heard that most respondents were from outside of North Vancouver. More non-residents traveled to the park by passenger vehicle compared to district residents, and most said that paid parking did not impact their visit. During the pilot, parking lot use and purchase parking ticket data was collected. The busiest times are weekend and holidays when the parking lot frequently exceeds capacity, and it's busy from late morning to late afternoon. Overall, the paid parking pilot was successful in several ways. It encouraged parking turnover, which improves access and visitor experience. The majority of park visitors for the feedback we received was positive, and no significant changes in neighborhood parking were noted during that time. Paid parking revenue will be reinvested into district parks, which will help to improve park infrastructure and the experience that visitors have there. Paid parking is a common approach to managing visitor parking demand, particularly for parks that are accessible by walking, rolling, and transit. Lastly, staff intend to continue to collect parking lot data to inform continual improvement for visitors and for parking. In conclusion, the recommendations are to establish paid parking at Lynn Canyon Park to manage visitor parking demand. And based on the outcomes of the pilot, to begin to develop paid parking at Deep Cove and Panorama Park. This would be coordinated with the Deep Cove parking review that's underway by the Transportation Department, and to explore paid parking at Kate's Park, Weyowichan, with Tsleil-Waututh Nation through the co-management agreement. Deep Cove, Panorama, and Kate's Weyowichan are prioritized because they are similar flagship parks with high visitation and tourism from outside of North Vancouver during these peak season. Parking demand management and improved visitor experience are priorities at this park. And should council direct staff to develop paid parking at these parks, staff would evaluate use trends and feasibility, and then return to council with recommendations on next steps. To answer your questions, Stephanie and I and Gavin are here in the room, and Peter Cohen is online representing transportation, and Rick Daniluk for finance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, you have a motion?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay. I'm happy to second. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you for another excellent presentation, really good. So a success, an absolute success. Can you tell me how many residents took out paid parking passes, the $10 passes? Do we have that data? Can you stop my clock? Those 3 seconds are important.
Through your worship to Councillor Murray. In 2021, 231 resident passes were sold and 145 in 2022.
Okay, so not as much as the first year.
Correct.
Okay, it went down. And do you, okay, so I hope that we're going to be advertising that again, just so people know. You know, just keep that on our website or at the front page, that there's always a parking pass that you can purchase at any time on the front page of the website, so people know, because I think sometimes they don't, and you know, you know, so I think, the money went right back into the park system. Now, like CACs, we put them back into the town centers, but the park, the money from the pay parking went into the park's budget. And that money is used not necessarily in Lynn Canyon, but it is dispersed throughout the park system, or it stays within that park.
Through your worship, currently it is in a reserve, a dedicated reserve where we can see as the funds are coming in and accumulated over time, and will be allocated to the park system.
Okay, so it's going to stay in a reserve until we want to allocate it, or it's going back into things like the ecology center, for instance, or, you know, because that was the premise, that was the original premise of the concept of selling it to district residents, that the money would be collected and then put right back into the park system again, right? For improvements to the park. And as we continue on our tour, you're going to see how much improvement we need and how handy that money is going to be.
And that is the premise, yes.
Okay. The neighborhood impact, we dealt with a lot of neighborhood resident parking only systems, certainly around the neighborhood of Lynn Canyon. That was successful. I know that I know that there's a bit of a backlog with applications for resident parking only within the municipality, within the transportation program. And so we need to address that. Obviously, I moved the motion, so I'm supportive of going forward with the recommendation. I need to understand the timing for Deep Cove, because Deep Cove there's a lot of stuff coming for Deep Cove. And there were these patio licenses tonight. There is the revitalization of Gallant, and there's going to be the timing of that. And the businesses are just recovering after COVID. And if there is another construction impact, like the one that we just went through for the culvert, that is another impact on their businesses. So we need to understand the timing of that construction, Mr. Joyce. We have gotten a letter from the local business association today. Mr. Knox sent in one, and they are concerned about the construction schedule and how that will impact them, this new patio concept that we're looking at. And then if we turn around and implement, or we begin doing surveys on a pay parking scheme, it's a lot when you're trying to run a little tiny business in that little village area. So can you give me a little bit more information on the timing of this proposal for Deep Cove? Gavin, Mr. Joyce.
Your worship, yeah, we did talk a little bit, the previous discussion about the work on Gallant Avenue. So that tender, council has an update on that. That tender has been let. And so I expect that works to continue this year. What you're at tonight to look at is to send staff back to develop a concept for the pay parking at Deep Cove and Canorama. So we would take that into that commentary when we develop that proposal. When we come back, there is a lot going on in the Cove. We recognize that. And so be working with that. Yeah, not to blend both topics, but previous on the last one as well, you talked about the flexible patio areas. We'd look at bringing that and probably have that established in 2024 as well, after the work that's been done by the planning department.
So parking wouldn't be implemented, pay parking in the Cove, your timeline would not be until 2024?
Likely would not be part of the 2023 budget, but we will bring it back. We'll seek direction from council on the timing as well. I mean, we're suggesting, your recommendation is that we consider that and you send us back to develop that and bring it back here based on the results that we got from Lynn Canyon, which we believe were successful on several fronts. And we'd like to expand that into those parks that are regional in nature and generate people from other municipalities.
And I think we continue to work with Metro Vancouver in that regard. Metro Vancouver is looking at continued implementation of pay parking scenarios. They're also at Bunsen last year, they tested a reservation system that was hugely successful. From the perspective of the user going into the park, it was a much better experience than, you know, cars everywhere lining up. We're also, I sit on the Parks Committee, as you know, and we're also looking at a new app that is going to be implemented, I believe, this year in regards to parking lots and whether they're full. So you don't even have to go to the park. You know that the parking lot is full and you're not going to that park today. So so I hope that we continue to think outside of the box in that regard. Miss Warner and I did a little tour of our trail system the other day, and well, part of Metro's trail system, but it's all the same system as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, the impact on the forest floor is significant. The forests are not, they're not happy right now. And, you know, we need to look at how we manage all the visitors to these areas and, you know, manage this very valuable asset that we have. So thank you for the report, and I'm very supportive.
I'll be supporting it as well. I think that Kate's Park is probably ready to come up sooner rather than later. But I agree that there's probably some good strategy in, you know, contemplating what we're going to do at Deep Cove and Panorama, just possibly up to 2024. I think that I'd have some concerns about changing it this year with all of the construction issues that we're going to be having at the front end of that time period, where presumably we'd be losing the street parking in that Gallant section while we're doing that upgrade. The only other thing I would add is I'm a frequent regular user of Kate's Park. It's my neighborhood park. I live a little bit away from there. And at the beginning of COVID, we put these big yellow gates at the very, very top of the driveway. And the intent was to be able to close off the park if we needed to close off the park. The challenge is that we have never used them for closing off the park, and they are in everybody's eye line as you're trying to turn across traffic, turning to the west onto Dollarton. You can't see through them. All of a sudden you look to the left and all you see is yellow gates everywhere, and it makes it very hard. It means you have to go way out in the lane to be able to see traffic coming towards you. And I've heard numerous comments from people saying they don't like them. They're not well positioned. If there was an opportunity to move those down to the upper lot as it suited our construction schedules, as we had equipment in the general area, I think that would be a whole lot better than having the gates up at the top. For the frequency with which they'd be required, they pose a far more serious hazard to public safety than they serve as a benefit to us. And so my view would be that we need to move those as an opportunity presents. But I'm fully supportive of Kate's Park being added to the paid parking pilot. The nice thing about Kate's versus some of the other ones is the spillover into the neighborhood is really mitigated because it's so far to walk from the neighborhood parking into the park under most conditions. Challenge you're going to have with Deep Cove and Panorama is that the spillover is going to go into an already heavily burdened neighborhood that we already have relatively tight parking restrictions on. And so again, it's going to create that situation where people just drive around and around and around looking for parking because they're not going to want to pay in the lot. They're not going to qualify for the short-term parking, and they're just going to go around and around, which is a concern. But I'm supportive of the pay parking pilot. Next speaker I have is Councillor Hanson, followed by Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your report, very detailed. Thank you for the comments we've received today. I also am supportive. I'm supportive of continuing the Lynn Canyon Park pay parking, also Deep Cove Panorama and Kate's Park. Frankly, I'm supportive of expanding pay parking with respect to the destination parks across the district. I believe the fee of $3 an hour is reasonable, at least for the moment. From my point of view, given the climate that we live in terms of demand for our amenities here on the North Shore, and the scarcity of the parking, the traffic issues around the parking on certain occasions, I believe that pay parking is an appropriate demand management tool. From a lot of people's perspective, they'd rather pay a little bit for parking than get to a lot that's full and drive around and around and not be able to park and see the park. I also think it's an appropriate means to raise revenue from visitors to the park, and that this raises the issue of resident passes for those of us in the district, we're of course eligible for a pass. I personally would like to see those passes free. I know we're currently charging $10.20, and there were 231 of these sold in 2021, so that's $2,300. I think for the sake of $2,300, we could make the gesture to our residents, those that are going to be paying an ever increasing taxes here in the district, that they can get their parking pass for free so long as they come down to the district and get it. And I think with that in place, I think there would be a great public support for continued pay parking at all of the destination parks in the district. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
There's a problem with being the fourth person to talk. Everything's already been said.
About fast fingers.
So to be a little bit cheeky, I was going to bring up the $10 charge to the district, and I'm in favor of the zero as well. I think the district taxpayers pay enough that they don't need to be nickel and dime on everything. And I also think that they support our parks as much as they can. It's the excess traffic that we've been getting in the last few years that really is taking its toll. So I wanted to mention that and inquire, there's no inflation increase on the $10 if we can't get it to zero. It's going to stay at $10 and it's good for all pay parking.
Through your worship, there is no inflation added to the season's pass, and it currently only applies at Lynn Canyon because we don't have pay parking anywhere else at the moment.
But
So
what is your thinking going forward when we have more pay parking in the district? Will that, we'll have to decide if we can get it to zero, and then it won't matter. But I hope that if we can't get it to zero, that the $10 applies across the board. Just my comment. And then the other thing is just curiosity. What's a 24% parking tax administered by TransLink? Seeing as how everything else has been talked about.
Pay for your buses. That's administered region-wide. If you pay, if you make parking pay, then you have to have a percentage fee on it. If parking is fully free, then obviously 24% of free is free. So, but yes, it's largely meant to target commercial parking for downtown, and overwhelmingly the revenue for it comes from downtown and transit station parking areas where people are parking for the full day. So yeah,
So
it's applied across the entire TransLink jurisdiction.
So it's, I was wondering if it was something specific to Metro's properties, but
Nope.
it's not. It's just a
It's all.
transportation tax. It's all across. Okay,
Properties that have a commercially rentable parking space.
okay. By the way, I'm in favor of the motion.
Councillor Ma, followed by Back and Pope. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. You think going fourth is hard? Try going fifth.
I didn't say anything else.
I'm supportive of the motion. I'm glad to hear that the visitors had a good experience, regardless of the parking and the app. Those pay parking apps are perfect. This is a question, and maybe I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel for a question, but do you have any numbers on the number of violation notice given to people that overparked? Because where I'm coming from is I don't want this to be perceived as a revenue grab. It's about managing traffic.
You don't want this to be perceived as a revenue grab.
We want people to come to our parks.
You just don't want them to bring their cars. Yeah.
Worship, when we analyzed the parking, paid parking sessions and the violation tickets, it's about approximately 3% of all paid parking sessions result in a violation ticket.
That's pretty low.
Mr. Joyce has additional comments.
To add to that, Your Worship, Council also directed us to go to 3 hour to 4 hours in some areas, which gave people a little extra time for longer hikes. So that would also impact that as well. On the previous comment from Councillor Forbes, the intent prior with the previous council was that one pass would cover all the areas if we expanded this program. So it would be one resident pass. And if council was accepting a Panorama or Deep Cove or Kate's Parkway, Chichen, then that pass would cover all those parks as well.
Okay. I was just wondering, there's not a lot of businesses in those areas, but there's a restaurant in the Lynn Canyon. Was there any feedback from them in terms of impact on their business, in terms of, visitors having to pay for parking?
Through your worship, we did not receive any negative feedback. And in fact, because of the program encouraging turnover,
Yeah.
it's better. It keeps that flow going.
Yeah,
And
perfect.
overall, our observations and the feedback is it was very positive throughout the park.
Okay.
Also, if I may say, that the current operator was not in business there before the pilot was engaged. So they
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
have been through times when there was no pay parking in the space.
I just want to confirm the scope or the area of the parking. Is it restricted to the parking lots, or is it potentially, a few spaces on the entrance to the park area that may not be in front of a residential area?
Your worship, the pay parking pilot and what's being proposed is to have pay parking within the parking lot, so off-street parking within the park. And that's for the parking lot accessed by Peters Road on the west side of the park. On the east side of Lynn Canyon Park by Lillooet Road, there's another parking lot for Lynn Canyon Park, and that one is free and to remain free.
But
Great.
some of the neighboring streets that were anticipated to have overflows, so Peters, Duval, Robinson, there were parking restrictions placed on those streets so that there wouldn't be spillover into those streets. Yeah.
That's part of the whole management.
Right, but I just want to make sure that,
Yeah.
because, you go to some places, those meters are like everywhere, so.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm generally supportive of it, anything that addresses, mobility issues in the district, especially traffic going to our key destination areas that are next to residential areas. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beck, followed by Councillor Pope. Councillor Beck, your comments.
Thank you very much to both of you for the presentation. I wanted to comment on some of the visitor experience improvements that are being contemplated as we move forward, in particular bike racks and bike storage. I don't know that there's much in the way of bike storage in Lynn Canyon Park right now. I don't think around the pay parking area there's any. So I'd be very supportive of seeing that, as well as the Lime bike parking. I think that would be a welcomed improvement for people that are coming to the park, not in vehicles, which is what we're trying to promote. Opinion, but I am not supportive of the resident exemption. I think that we're trying to encourage everyone to look at different ways of getting to the park other than in a vehicle, and by rewarding people that potentially live closest to the park with free parking, I think kind of goes against that. But I know that was a discussion that we had with the previous council, and I still tend to feel that it should be the same for everybody. But I do support continuation. I think it's been an effective demand management tool in this park, and I would certainly support looking at Deep Cove, Panorama, and Kate's Weyowichin as well. Again, when we're looking at Deep Cove, though, we have to keep in mind that when we're encouraging people not to travel by car, there really is no safe way to ride a bicycle there. So all the more reason to be making sure that we're investing in active transportation, and the Spirit Trail that we ultimately need to extend to Deep Cove, I think really needs to be a priority when we're looking at this. So very supportive of the recommendation, though. Thank you.
Show you all the back routes in Deep Cove to safely get from the parkway down to the park.
Thank you. Councillor Pope.
I understand that there was the residents only parking on some of those streets. Have we heard any complaints from people who are further out than just those immediate streets around Lynn Canyon that are having to cope with overflow?
Through your worship, maybe I can handle that one. So Mr. Carney and his team in transportation have been working with the residents in the implementation of the PO that you've been heard about is in its final stages for implementation. We monitor that. That exists in all areas. You're right. As you tend to get into an RPO zone, there's a tendency to creep. But so far that hasn't occurred. The farther you get away, obviously, the less impact it has. But we monitor that, and there's policies that covers that offer on street parking.
Okay, thank you. I have heard from somebody who's very, very fed up in the neighborhood with having a lot of this traffic go into their neighborhood. So I wonder if it might be worthwhile looking at to see if it needs to be expanded at all, or just at least even surveying some of the residents. Did we do any resident surveys?
Through your worship, we do, and certainly that individual can contact me or the staff, and we would look at those areas. That's how we monitor that, and that's how we hear about those, and we perform studies on those to see if it meets the policy. So certainly would look at that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I absolutely support free district passes. I had no idea this even existed until this came up. And so I also support Councillor Murray's suggestion of advertising this more. I think that the families that need it are the ones who, would make use of it, and the ones that are comfortable and don't need and can afford to pay, $9 for 3 hours with the kids. They wouldn't probably necessarily apply to have the free pass. So I too would like to see that as free overall. I think part of the solution, obviously a huge part of the solution, is to reduce the number of cars. And I would like to see us do more to facilitate that. For example, using shuttles from the C-bus to the park. Perhaps even revenue generated from parking could subsidize that in some way, or at least look at, investigating it and producing a report into the viability of that. Of course, I agree with Councillor Back's suggestion that we need to do more to encourage biking along that corridor to Kate's Park and Deep Cove, and have safe types of lanes in place there. And those are my comments. I support the expansion to Deep Cove and Panorama Park. I recognize it is a demand management tool that works, but overall, I still think we need to come back to the key issue of reducing the number of cars going to the park in the first place.
Okay. Thank you very much. We come back around. Councillor Murray, your additional comments?
I just wanted to add a couple of things. I just wanted to help answer some of those questions. And I'll just give you the stat from 2020 when Dr. Henry told everybody to go outside. Metro has an ability in their park system to be able to count users coming in. And in October by October 21st of 2020, 13.1 million visitors from January to the end of September into the Metro Vancouver Regional Park System had happened, compared to the previous year of 11.9 million. Now, Metro is reporting that those people are still there. They didn't go back inside. When Bonnie said, everybody get outside, they did, and they stayed outside. They have not gone back inside again. They're still there. So there's a huge amount of people coming into this system. Even if we didn't have the pay parking, people park, as the mayor has commented on in the Cove. I've been talking about it for years, driving around to find that coveted parking spot. We have schools, and this was another challenge that we had, working with the school district to try to get them to open their parking lots of their schools on the weekends, because they used to chain them and you didn't have any access into them. And so we opened up the parking lots. They agreed to open up their parking lots. And now I think we can say that Sea Cove parking lot is not full on a weekend in the Cove because people don't want to walk that far. So they drive around and drive around and drive around. So we have to deal with that. And, you know, Metro, as I use the Bunsen Lake example, that's how they dealt with it. They put a reservation system in. So Metro has been testing a whole bunch of different demand management tools, reservations, a shuttle system. They put in a shuttle system at Lynn Headwaters last year in the summer. Yes, they did. And it was a bust. It went from the C bus and it went from Fibs as well, I think. And the response to using a shuttle system was not something that there was an uptake on, because people are going there for a certain reason. Locals go into those parks, you know, to do their hike, their walk, their dog, you know, that bit of exercise. In this period of time when we're implementing pay parking into the system, because it's not 365 days a year, it's during the high peak seasons. The vast majority of people are coming into the system are outside of the municipality, as you've reported in your stats. It's visitors coming in, spending the day, picnicking, et cetera, going down to Gates Park, spending the day, going to the Cove, spending the day, hiking Quarry Rock, and then having lunch. So it's human behavior. And we were getting, I mean, the number of complaints, I mean, the biggest complaint in the district is parking. And
it sounds like we have a consensus.
no, I know. I'm just
Like
trying to
to-
answer some of the questions
yeah.
about what we're doing. So I think this is the challenge with when we have new counselors. There's lots of questions and lots of information that we have to provide. And there's a lot of issues that we need to look at and try to address. So I just, you know, I just put those things out to say that we have done a lot of these things, and they don't, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men don't always work out. So.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your additional comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask Mr. Stewart. I went blank there for a minute. Is it a possibility that we could, besides regular advertising that we might do for these DNV passes for the residents, following up on Councillor Pope's mention, could we put something in the annual tax notice?
Your worship, we'll have to do some planning, but we'll look into that. We've got a limited amount of space just because of weight.
Yeah.
So we have to pick and choose what we're going to put in there besides, you know, information on taxation.
I just think, seeing as, you know, the timing of when that comes out and summer and everything else, that it would be we might get a good return on that. Thank you.
Might be something as simple as just drawing their attention to them and a website.
Yeah.
That's exactly what.
Okay, I was just gonna add a quick comment about the cycling into the Cove. The challenge is the land that the district manages, administers, is so steep that you have to cut across the contours in order to make it safe enough. And so if you go onto Beaufort, you come down the parkway just past my house to a street called Beaufort, and you go into Beaufort, there's actually a very gradual, dedicated, separated bike lane that takes you all the way down to Cliffmont, I think is the road on Deep Cove Road. So there is, it becomes super steep at the tail end once you get onto Cliffmont, because again, it's a very steep hill that you're doing, but that one is the most gradual, is coming down from Beaufort down to Cliffmont, but the last 300 feet is got to be a 10% grade. It's super steep. And so it's just a tricky area. You're descending from probably my house right by the fire hall. We're probably about 800 feet above sea level. And so you got to descend about 800 feet from there to Deep Cove. And really there's very few gradual ways to do it. So it is tricky. Okay, I don't see any further hands at this point. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is item 8.6, the 2023 Housing Policy Initiatives. And Mr. Milburn, okay, it's been moved by Councillor Murray. Is there any comments from staff on this one?
Your worship, Ms. Adva has some very brief comments, and then we're able to answer questions. Thank you.
I'm happy to second the motion, and then we'll get it on the floor, but Ms. Atba will come to you for your presentation at this point.
Thank you very
And,
much.
yep.
Good evening, your worship, members of council. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. This report tonight highlights 8 specific housing initiatives that are proposed to be advanced in 2023. These are different projects that all aim to help provide more diversity, supply, and affordability in the district. Just like to really briefly go over them and note that there's a timeline for these items on page 187 of the report. First item, housing options for single family neighborhood. This is looking at secondary suites, coach houses, small lots, duplexes, triplexes, multiplexes, and short-term rentals. Council authorized engagement last spring, so staff will be coming back with those engagement findings and propose next steps at a February 13th workshop. That's the goal. Secondly, district-owned lands for affordable housing. This is in line with council's ongoing commitment to use district land for social and supportive housing. Also, engagement took place last spring on 2 sites, and council heard back on the strong levels of support for the 2 sites that were looked at. We are also looking at evaluating these further and also looking at the memorandum that we have with BC Housing on prioritizing next sites for social and supportive housing. Financial analysis for affordable housing. This is work that we're doing to help us understand how viable it may be to provide affordable housing in new multifamily developments. So this involves looking at community amenity contributions and development cost charges. Development approval process. We heard earlier that there's in the planning stages, a review that will start from the very beginning inquiry stage to the occupancy stage, and look at how we can make those processes better and how we can streamline projects that advance the district's vision. Couple more to mention, and then I'll be done. Rental tenure zoning. A workshop was held last summer with 3 possible approaches. We're just coming to the end of a financial analysis that will help us to understand how this zoning tool can have, what impact this zoning tool may have on preserving existing rental and also helping us to get new rental in multifamily areas. So we'll be reporting back to council when that work is completed. The regional homeless account last took place in 3 years. The next one is coming up this March. We are also looking at a town and village center survey to help us understand how people like living in the buildings and in the neighborhoods. And lastly, updating the housing needs report. It's only been a year since council adopted, just over a year, our housing needs report, but we know that we want to update it before the required 5 years is up as we get new census data, which we actually don't have all yet. So this is a summary for you. There will be more detailed conversations and reporting coming up throughout the coming year and also in the next few months. The recommendation before you today is to receive this report for information. And I'll just like to note that the report authors and project leads, Ryan Gilmore and Jessica Lee, are also here tonight to respond to any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.
So, Councillor Mayor, you moved to
I'll
receive.
move receipt.
Seconder?
I think the mayor seconded it.
Seconded by Councillor Back.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hanson. Yeah, I obviously, all of this work is very critical, and I'm glad that we're doing the development approval process review. I think we've needed to address that for some time, and certainly we've had, a number of pieces of correspondence from builders and contractors and residents trying to deal with projects that are stuck and the frustration behind that. The housing policy initiatives that we're looking at in regards to single family, secondary suites, short-term rentals. I think we're near 12 of waiting to discuss Airbnbs. It just got pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And I think there's a percentage of revenue coming from Airbnb that is actually being submitted to the Hotel Association, even though we don't allow short-term rentals in the district. So we have a problem there that we need to address. And then we've spoken about coach houses and those things that we're going to discuss at an upcoming workshop. But, you know, I really hope that this council is going to be interested in getting our own house in order and making sure that we're living within our means. And affordable housing is one of those challenging things, that affordability is different to everybody. And as market rents continue to rise, and we understand that a bachelor suite in a new development in the city of North Vancouver is being rented for $27.50 a month. Now, that's not affordable housing, that's market housing. But good God, when does the ceiling crack? And rents going up 2% every year, you know, in 5 years, it's far from affordable. Supply and demand has not solved this problem. New housing, new affordable housing, new that kind of housing is not affordable. It is not, it is old housing that we have to maintain and we have to look after. And that is the affordable housing for people that are really struggling. You know, over the last several weeks, Ms. Kelly Bond and myself have, and Catherine, Councillor Pope is also, and I know all of council's concerned about this, but we're trying to find a home for a displaced family out of a unit down on Marie Place. And we still do not have a place, FYI, and she is out at the end of this month. That whole process of our rental tenancy policy, or displacement policy, or whatever the acronym is, the rental, somebody help me here. Thank you, thank you. The tenant relocation absolutely needs a review, and we need to add that to this work list, because I just realized the other day in talking to Eli Mallon, Susie Chant's executive assistant, that she was never put on the BC housing list. And one would assume that if the developer is going to be in charge of looking after homes for these people that are being displaced out of this development application, the first thing the coordinator that the developer is, or that's working for the developer, should have put all of those people on the BC housing list, because they are prioritized through the province to find housing if they are being displaced. And we have a lot of displacements in this region, and we've had a number of fires in this region too that have also prioritized people that are finding, or in need of finding homes. So I would like to restructure this work initiative a little bit better. I do not think it is a priority in town and village centers to do surveys of existing residents to see how they're feeling when we need to do a review on this tenant relocation. I just think that's something that we can put off for another day and start focusing on things like this policy that definitely needs to be reviewed. The other one that I have a bit of an issue with is this residential rental tenure zoning analysis and options. And we are doing a financial analysis that is currently underway to understand the potential impacts of residential rental tenure zoning on existing purpose-built rental properties. Those purpose-built rental properties that were built in the 70s and 80s, that are old, that are affordable, that don't have stainless steel and marble everywhere. Those we need to keep. And that is why the province brought this tool in order for us to protect that zoning and not have it be speculated upon by the development industry. And that, my friends, is what I believe has caused this crisis in housing, that land throughout Metro Vancouver has been speculated on, and older rental buildings have not been looked after in many cases. And then there is the plea, well, it's going to cost me too much to look after it. We got to just do the rezoning. We're going to sell it. And that was not the concept behind the provincial government changing that rule and giving us the opportunity. Now, it's been bumpy, it's challenging, there's issues around it. But I know when this was first brought up, the financial analysis, why are we doing a financial analysis on private property? And that's what was originally brought up last year, a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, in regards to redevelopment applications on these rental sites, because there are many. Emery Place was one of them. And I don't understand why we're doing a financial analysis. We are in charge of zoning and land use. We should be protecting, which is what the OCP actually dictates within the policy statements, that older housing, older multifamily housing should be protected.
Counselor, you're up over 6 minutes. Can I get you to draw to a close?
Oh, that goes so fast.
It does.
That's why these kinds of things should come to workshops to discuss, because there's so many implications behind here.
Thank you.
Those are my comments.
Thank you. And do I understand, unless you're Counselor Forbes, did you already speak to this matter or did you want to? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, Counselor Back seconded the motion. Sorry, Counselor Back, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to support or second this, receiving this for information. Thank you very much to staff for the summary of all of the various housing policy initiatives here. I think there's, a lot of things that have to happen at once, and I think we need to try and move forward, as quickly as we can in so many of these areas. Around creating affordable housing within our town centers. That's something that I would like to see start to move forward in this term. I know updating our MOU with the province is something that will need to happen, so that we can look and see what we can do on these district-owned sites, particularly the fire hall and the fire training center. I'm really keen to see the different scenarios for what we can do with those particular sites. And definitely looking at the housing options for single-family neighborhoods. I know that was looked at a number of times last term, but I hope that that's an area where we can really make some progress this term in terms of secondary suites and coach houses. And finally, as Councillor Miri has said, take a good look at short-term rentals and their impact on the market. But yeah, it's a great summary, and I think, as I say, there's lots of things that all do need to happen. I think the town and village surveys are an important aspect of this as well. We want to know who's living in these town centers now, and if they're, if they're getting the kind of services and experience that they were promised when they moved into those town centers. So I'm actually quite interested in that element of this as well. So yeah, very supportive of receiving this.
Thank you very much, Counselor Back. Counselor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for the report. Again, I would like to see this report. We've accepted it for information tonight, but I'd like to see a workshop on all of this stuff. And I didn't take it that the ordering of this was the order we were going to do things. So is that the case, that this is the order we're going to start doing things? Well, I know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Atva, do you have a response to that?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, through to Councillor Forbes. The order in the report generally aligns with the timeline on page 187, which tried to set out the items that staff are proposing would come back to council at a earlier part of 2023, and others that would spread throughout 2023.
Thank you. Just a couple things. I mean, we really need to get, I don't know if we can, but I mean, we need to be really trying to get that affordable housing, more units as fast as we can, and rental, non-market rental, and protecting the purpose-built rentals. But so I have to question, under the development approval process, it says staff will initiate work in Q1 2023 on the development approval process review and report back to council in 2024 with recommendations and proposed next steps. Why is it going to take a year for us to get a report back on that? Anybody?
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes, through the mayor. This is part of a many step pieces of work, as the report mentions, as was reported in the previous item on your agenda regarding development variance permits. The review is intended to look at all pieces of the development process, from inquiries to occupancy. So there are a number of pieces to that. There is also the intention to have some resources retained to help us do that work. And we know that takes a little bit of time as well. But as is noted here and was noted in the earlier item, that there is an intent to come back and be present back to council throughout the year.
Okay, I just have to say, I don't think that's acceptable, really. I'm not blaming staff. I don't know if you're short of staff or why. I understand that this is a major process to go through, but we need, affordable housing is up there in the top category that we need, and waiting a year to get a report isn't really satisfactory. So I hope we can
Mr.
look at
Milburn
that.
has some additional comments that assists. Mr. Milburn?
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to step in there. In terms of the timeline, it's what I would call just an estimation at this point. The reason being is in the first quarter, we intend to come back to council with a workshop conversation about the development application review process and a proposed scope for that work and timeline associated with that scope. However, we anticipate council may want to refine that. And of course, then the timeline can adjust to council's expectations at that time. So this is just a preliminary estimation of the time. And as mentioned earlier as well, we certainly don't see this as a black box exercise where we simply get some scope confirmation from council, go away and come back 12 months later with some recommendations. We think that there could be, low-hanging fruit. There could be opportunities along the way to see various updates to council throughout the year. So you could see progress, you could see milestone achievements, you could see improvements along the way. So we certainly, that wasn't the intent to indicate it would be a year without council conversation. It would be council directed from the get-go. And then we're just estimating that timeline right now until council gives more clear direction. Thank you.
It's okay to be a little bit more restrictive. Another concern that I have is the housing needs report update. I specifically brought this up in the workshop in November, that thanks to Kelly Bond as well, brought it to my attention, and I think it's an excellent idea, and I brought it to Dave Stewart, and we were going to have court try to get more timely reports on that. And I was asking for quarterly. Maybe I was dreaming on quarterly, but I mean, we don't have to wait for stats necessarily. We should be moving. We can do a dashboard. We can do an Excel spreadsheet. And all it requires is then inputting the number each term, each quarter. And so, I mean, this was asked for in the last term, and I'm frustrated that we can't get this more timely. Again, this is priority in the district. So, I mean, I want us to have a dashboard or a spreadsheet that makes it really easy and efficient for staff to be able to plug the numbers and get the result and give us some idea of what's happened. At least, if we can't do it quarterly, at least semi-annually. But I mean, to wait a year and sit back and wait for Census Canada numbers just isn't good enough either.
Mr. Milburn has another response.
And thank you very much for that feedback. We heard that strong and clear at the council orientation and budget discussions as well. And we're working with our IT services around appropriate software for some kind of dashboard that could be continuously updated. The housing needs report is a different instrument. It's actually a statutorily required report through the Local Government Act, and charter. And the statute and regulation actually lays out specific statistical information that must be provided, that is provided by Statistics Canada every census period. And that information from the 2021 census, I don't want to say trickles out, but comes out at a periodic basis. And so what the timeline is purely a reflection of when we anticipate that data will be available from Statistics Canada, then we'll compile it and bring it forward to council. And but that's a different conversation than this dashboard conversation. So that's the explanation for why that timing. Thank you.
I know that I talked to this issue about getting some kind of mechanism to plug numbers in the first term, and we're still working on it. Do you have any timeline on when we might have that ability?
Your Worship, I believe, Councillor Forbes, I believe IT Services mentioned 2023 is to implement at the council orientation. So we're working on that timeline to get it done for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that's my comments. I just want more information faster so we can move quicker.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Councillor Pope, followed by Councillor Moore. Councillor Pope, your comments.
Well, I'm so glad to hear the sentiments around this table that housing and affordable housing is something we need urgently. I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record already, and I just got here about the fact that we are in a housing crisis and it is dramatically affecting people who live here. And we need to do something about it quickly. To that end, item number 1, housing options for single-family neighborhood initiatives, including coach houses, duplexes, multiplexes. I'm not quite sure why we have to have a workshop about this. Which to me is actually delaying us further from moving forward. I would really like to see that. I would like to see it. Your suggestions, staff suggestions, as to what the options are for coach houses, duplexes, multiplexes, in a report that we can vote on, and then it can go through its processes from there. I don't quite know. I understand councils previously had workshops on this over the years. So we have had workshops, and all the information is there. Other municipalities are moving forward on it. And so in keeping with the current feeling on around this table that I'm hearing anyway, is we want to move more quickly. So for that one in particular, I think we can and we should. And I'm not sure how to turn that into some sort of action at this moment, or even if I can I do that?
So the motion is that is currently on the floor is to receive for information. Now,
Yeah.
what is already on the agenda is on the February 13th is the workshop.
Yeah.
We also have a night in March that we have a regular meeting of council that's intended to have some of these
Yeah.
items come back for the decision making. And so, yeah, you're right. It's about, it would be about, I don't know, 6 weeks until that actual decision night is currently planned. Fast tracking it without the workshop information, the point of the workshop is to come back from the public consultation that was done and go over the consultation and what it means for the council. And the consultation in this case was a little bit complex in that it had coach houses, it had short-term Airbnbs, it had different types of layouts on buildings that you could do with secondary suites and coach houses. It was fairly complex consultation, and so rather than having the staff come back and report on a regular meeting of council where you may have 10 items on the agenda, we would have it come back on a workshop where you'd only be talking about single-family housing issues. All of the aspects of single-family housing issues, but only single-family housing issues. And then when it would come back to council, it would come back as individual items at that time.
Okay, I still feel very strongly that, yes, we may be speaking in terms of weeks, but but I think we have to wrap our heads around making this process faster and streamlining our processes in every way we can, so that when we have the information, there's something going on outside. I don't know if it's.
No.
So when we have the information, we can move forward with it. I think we have the information. And I also think we have the information on the district-owned lands. We need to move more quickly on that for affordable housing. I agree with Councillor Murray on the just getting rid of the residential rental tenure zoning analysis and options, and looking at things like, as you pointed out, leveraging the provincial funding for retaining the old rentals. And very importantly, the tenant relocation definitely needs to be reviewed. I had read somewhere that there was going to be hiring of a liaison to work directly with the displaced. Does anyone know about that? Dan does.
There was a manager of affordable housing.
No, this
there
was
discussion about whether you would have a planner focused on affordable housing or a manager focused on affordable housing. In the probably the beginning of last year, the decision was made that a planner with that kind of specialized focus was more the right place to make that kind of decision-making, but they were not acting as a finder fee, someone searching for specific housing. They were changing policy to support affordable housing. Unless, Mr. Milburn, am I missing
No, I
something?
think there's something new in the works.
In fact, I believe the question was with respect to a sort of a tenant relocation coordinator associated with a development project. Is that the question?
I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it came out of the displaced people who were from the fires mainly. The need, at least that was the context I read it in. So we don't have knowledge of this here.
So the North Shore Emergency Management
Yes.
Group has been doing their best to manage it. It's not really their core business. And
I know.
And so.
But they only do temporary emergency shelter, and what we need is
Correct.
Is the gap. Like this woman from Emery Place that's going to be displaced at the end of the month still needs some longer term support and help in some way. So at any rate, I do think that's a whole policy area that we really have to take a look at and update and make it better.
As it currently stands, we put that burden on the developer. Unfortunately, that's resulted in different responses from different developments.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got councillors Ma, Hanson, and Forbes. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I'm glad to see the summary of
Sorry, before we get going, we need to mind the time. We have to extend the meeting beyond 10:30. So I'll move extension beyond 10:30, second by Councillor Back. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor, contrary minded. You will not get a unanimous 11 o'clock. So we need to wrap these two items up tonight, or we have to deal with them on another night. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zapp. I'm glad to see the summary of these various housing initiatives. I know Councillor Forbes kind of mentioned this earlier, but the idea that what's missing on this list is that dashboard that we talked about, this tracking the housing, because I think we need to know what's in the works. So in some ways, this, keep our eye on the ball. There's a project that keeps coming up every couple of meetings, and it's a project that I worked on in my previous position at BC Housing, is the project at 16th and Lloyd. I know I got a response from staff in terms of, some of the delays, but this is a project that has 60 units and is targeted towards women with, or women-led families. Whenever we break ground, it's going to at least be another 2 years. So this is way out there. And this has been approved. I think we just need to try to find ways to facilitate this. I know it's challenging. BC Housing has a lot of projects on the go. We just got to, make sure we get in the queue with BC Housing so they know that we're serious and we want to get moving. So I'm glad to hear that there's discussions with the people at BC Housing. So I encourage that those discussions continue to happen, and hopefully we get some action from the whole project team to move this forward. Because in some ways we keep talking about, what's affordable, how do we get to affordable housing? Senior levels of government, whether it's the feds or the provincial government, those are programs that we really need to take advantage of to achieve the affordability in housing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll keep my comments brief. I thank staff for the painstaking work that was put into preparation of the report, and I thank all my council colleagues for their comments. This update is important. Obviously, this topic area is extremely important and rising in importance all across the province and across the country. The update is important, all of this initiatives. From my point of view, as I look over these initiatives, they're all important. They're all pointed towards the goal of expanding housing supply in the district. And I certainly have heard the comments around the table about the need for timeliness, and there is a need for timeliness. We do need to move swiftly with these because the urgency of the circumstance is increasing. So I will leave my comments there, except to say that I look forward to timely progress on these initiatives and well, timely progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, additional comments?
Well, I forgot to ask one thing. Maybe Mr. Milburn can help me out. The net multifamily dwelling units by housing type and phase development chart. We had a similar chart last year. And I couldn't find my notes on it, and nor can I recall exactly why, when you total down the right-hand side, it's not the same as totaling all the sums along the bottom. So to refresh my memory and inform the new counselors, why do those numbers not match?
Your worship, the cut and paste table is from the 2021 Pace Development Report, so it's 2 snapshots in time. In terms of the totals, it's not necessarily a total column. It's just an expression of various forms of housing. So how about we meet possibly afterward, and I can just walk you through to show you exactly where the numbers come from. Essentially, the Pace Development Report takes the same set of basic data and tries to show it in a few different ways. And in that particular table, it's expressing a snapshot in time, how many applications of various types we had at one point. If you phrase the question differently, like sequentially, how many have we approved since a certain date up to today or up to the end of 2021? It's a different total. So it really depends on, there's many ways to slice the data. We have tried an approach with the Pace Development Report and council, and we will look for council's feedback on how to continue to refine that data so that it can be usable by council, but happy to sit down and walk you through it afterward.
I think it would be an explanation that would benefit the new counselors as well. So as much as I appreciate a private invitation, I think we should find some way to inform all of council.
And when the new Pace Development Report comes out, we will be presenting that to all of council and can meet with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mayor Little, I did ask a question in regards to why we're doing a financial analysis on private property for the rental tenure zoning, and I didn't get an answer.
I heard that question, Mr. Milburn.
Your worship, 2 key questions come up when you look at essentially some people use the term down zoning. It's essentially rezoning property that would reduce its value in the marketplace. It would be affecting potentially approximately 50 properties that we presented to council in the summary map. And one of the key challenges with down zoning and existing property is each of them have a different ability to finance renovations to maintain their units. And by changing the market value of the property, that impacts their ability to borrow against the value of the property and therefore maintain the property. So there are implications both in terms of direct market value, but also in terms of the financeability of maintenance. And so we're trying to look at those questions carefully to try to understand and not result in unintentional consequences of applying a fairly significant change. And as well, council was interested in other options. So we brought back options to council to consider, including policy work, like a replacement policy that would provide clear guidance about affordability levels, because there are very significant limitations in the zoning. It doesn't control at all and doesn't prohibit a tear down and rebuild based on the current density, nor does it control the affordability level. That is all outside of the purview of the residential tenancy controls under that zoning. So it's a limited tool, and we want to make sure that council understands the full implications of the analysis.
I would like to, I think this has to come back though for discussion, because this is private property that we should, our role is not to advise on financial viability on private property and uses and speculation and down zoning. Our role is to accept applications or not, or to look at a tool that the province has given us that has been used in limited ways because of this fear that it would take out of the pot viable opportunities for significant redevelopment. So we do need to have a talk about this. I do not know why we're using taxpayers' money to do a financial analysis on private property for, I think, the direction to
continue with redevelopment of these properties that, according to our OCP, need to be protected because they're truly the only affordable ones. Like,
That's fair. I think we're not going to be able to address that tonight. And we are short on time tonight. So but I think I recall that example being used on a couple of buildings that were effectively acting as purpose-built rentals. And if we cap them on what there really was their current use, it would actually harm their ability to make the math work on their financing going forward. And so it might end up being counterproductive. But you're absolutely right. There is a question about what our role is in cooking the valuation, as it were, to the advantage of them. But we also don't want to lose purpose-built housing or have it be not able to be maintained properly. So it may be an area that someone would be better equipped to step in rather than the municipalities. But okay, Council, I see no further speakers on the matter. This matter is up for receipt. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Atba and Mr. Milburn, for your responses tonight. Okay, the last item up for discussion this evening is the 2023 Social Service Grants Core Funded Agencies, moved by Councillor Murray. Seconded by Councillor Ma. Your comments, Councillor Murray? Councillor Ma?
I was recently a member of CSAC, so I had an opportunity to learn and understand the positive impact that many of these societies make in our community. So I'm fully supportive of this report. And, even after 3 years of COVID, there's still a need out there in the community. It's just a little different, but I think this is great. There's about, 14, 15 different groups that we're supporting. And I looked through them all, and they're all justified their grants. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Just my own comments, actually question. I'm glad you're here, Councillor Ma, as a former CSAC member. That'd be really great if you can address this issue. I'm going to see Mr. Craver later in the week, and I'll probably ask him the same question, but why under our system would it be advantageous for Harvest Project to leave its core funded status, which I gather they were a relatively small number for the last couple of years, but why would it be advantageous for them to leave core status and go to an ad hoc grant? I don't know if Mr. Milburn, you have a response, or?
Your Worship, we have two staff who are very knowledgeable in this area. Erica Branson could be able to speak to that question, I would think.
Ms. Branson, you've waited to the tail end of the meeting here. So do you have a response to that? Why under our system would that be advantageous for them to walk away from core status when so many other organizations are desperate to become core?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. That is a great question. And I think until we look a little bit into some of the details around that, it may appear that it seems like a strange situation. The Harvest Project does receive about $12,000 in the Community Services Grant Program. And we did make the decision in partnership with that agency this year to consolidate their two grants just to reduce the administrative sort of burden of applying to multiple applications as well as the reporting. And they were introduced to the core funded grant portfolio in a time period where we were looking at it was for organic waste removal. So it's actually been several years that we've been working with that organization to determine where their best fit should be. And we landed together on them being in the community service grants moving forward.
Okay, it seems like less secure funding, but you're saying that the administrative burden makes it more worthwhile to be entirely under one granting system?
The majority of the funds that they've received from us in the past have always been in the municipal community service grants. They were just getting just under $3,000 in the core fund portfolio, and it really was primarily for organic waste removal, which was one of the areas of that work. So to reduce the administrative burden of applying and submitting multiple applications, it made more sense to increase, and we'll increase the community service grants. So they're not losing any money, but they'll stay in that second stream that you'll see in the summer.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to support the recommendation. I know there's a 4.5% increase for this year, which of course is somewhat less than inflation. And this responds to both inflationary pressures, but also population growth on the North Shore. 10.5% of North Shore residents living below poverty level, which is a number that only goes up and up, increasing inequality across the district. And I have said ever since I made my first comments with respect to social service grants, I believe this is an area where we could increase the budget. And these pressures on us increasing the budget, from my point of view, are only growing greater and greater because of this acute need that exists and has been outlined in the report. So I do look forward for my part to further discussion with respect to this budgeting item and an additional increase beyond the 4.5% for years going forward in the budget that we're going to discuss this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miri?
Well, I was just going to say that that was the commitment that staff made to council when we increased it last year, going forward, that we would be discussing that in the next budget cycle.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, staff, for your presentation. Council, we've completed the business of the evening. We are past the 10:30 mark. I guess we do have a little bit of time for reports if people would like to add their reports. The only report I was going to make tonight was that I had the pleasure of representing the district of North Vancouver at a Lunar New Year event at K-Meek Centre this last week. It was a fantastic event of arts, culture, dance, music, and really trying to support the diaspora of the Chinese community, the expats abroad. And so it was a great event. And so Gung Hei Fat Choi, happy year of the rabbit for everybody that recognizes Lunar New Year. It was a great event with city, district, and West Vancouver, and MLAs Ma and Kirkpatrick were also there as well. So there was good representation present. So that's the only report I'm going to be making tonight. Mr. Stewart, did you have a report?
Your worship, I just thought I'd mention there was an announcement for the Building Safer Communities. We received a grant for $1.79 million, and we're working with social planning and the RCMP to develop a program. Other municipalities have sort of put it in sort of a guns and gangs kind of thing. That's not the approach we're taking. We're looking at how we can actually improve our programs and outreach and engagement with youth so that they're making wise decisions. That's kind of the focus of our.
I think that's one of the big advantages of this funding in this situation. I get that we don't have a high crime index, but you're going to get to see communities that have a high crime index and how they respond, and you're going to get to see how communities more like ours respond, and you're going to come up with different ideas, and that's going to help inform future efforts to support our youth in particular. Councillor Hanson, is that from speaking before, or did you have a report?
No.
Okay, Councillor Forbes, did you have a report?
Listening to Mr. Stewart right now, I'll put in a plug for the Lynn Valley Youth Center that we've been trying to get going for years and years and years. That would be a good outreach, and we really need it in Lynn Valley. Thank you.
Okay, I see no further speakers or reports at this time, so we've completed the business. I'll accept adjournment, moved by Councillor Murray. I just want to express my appreciation to the members of the public who participated in the meeting tonight. And also special thanks to staff for all of the work you did preparing the reports that led us to our decisions tonight. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic evening.